Chapter 559. Ao Yun was running for his life at this moment. His usual elegant and graceful moon-white brocade robe had already been torn to shreds. His entire body was covered in blood. His body was also riddled with scars. His hair was somewhat messy. His lips were dry. Even his eye sockets had sunk in. He was recognized as the successor of the #1 clan in the Three Heavens. He was the grandson of the Ao clan's lineage. He was also the first successor to the clan lord's position. Ao Yun had never been in such a difficult situation. He had never been hunted down like this. He had never been on the run like this. He had been on the run for more than 3 months. He had been constantly running for his life since he had left the northern wastelands. He had been struggling on the line of life and death several times every day for more than 3 months. This Wuxia had lost a lot of weight by now. God knows where so many enemies had come from. Each of them was wearing black clothes and had their faces covered. He had met a group of them every time he had walked. There had been an ambush at every strategic location. Blood had flowed like a river along the way. He had been on a killing spree. The enemies had used a silent poisonous fog to ruthlessly trap the people of the Ao clan in the first wave of contact. The 4 Emperor-level experts had risked their lives to protect Ao Yun. All the other King-level experts had died. Ao Yun's entire army would have been wiped out if he hadn't been guarding against the sneak attack of the Black Devil clan. However, the invisible falcons that had been used to transmit information to the clan had also died in that poisonous fog. Therefore they had fallen into absolute isolation and helplessness. The long road was filled with murderous intent at every step. Then, enemies had appeared continuously. They had harassed, attacked, killed, and chased. Only 2 Emperor-level experts had remained by Ao Yun's side. The other 2 had lost their lives in order to protect Ao Yun in the ambush. It had been a tragic ambush. The enemy had dispatched 8 Emperor-level experts. They had rushed forward to kill Ao Yun's team of 5 people. Ao Yun would have been lying on the ground if he hadn't had a flash of inspiration in that battle. He had comprehended a low-grade king-level expert and made a breakthrough. He would have turned into an ice-cold corpse. Ao Yun's team had been forced to deviate from the direction of the Ao clan. They had turned to another road. Going back from the original road would have undoubtedly been courting death. Since the other party wanted to rob and kill him with such great fanfare, how could they be willing to let him return safely to the Ao clan? None of the clans in the Three Heavens could withstand the crazy attacks of the Ao clan. Therefore he had to be extremely careful. The slightest bit of carelessness would result in death on the road of escape. But even so, after continuously fleeing for 3.5 months, Ao proud world stage heavens, right? Yun also felt exhausted. There were more than 30 wounds on his body, which constantly reminded him that he couldn't escape anymore. If he continued to flee, even if the enemy couldn't catch up to him, his body would be done for. The 2 Emperor-level experts beside him were also on the verge of reaching the end of their lives. If it wasn't for their determination to protect the young master, they probably wouldn't have been able to hold on any longer. Both of their cultivations were top-notch, 5th-grade Emperor-level experts. This was definitely the pinnacle of the Three Heavens. But the problem is, which 5th-grade Emperor-level expert has to face the attacks of at least 7 or 8 Emperor-level experts every day? Moreover, it's more than once, and more than twice. At most, there would be a dozen waves of attacks a day. Even an Iron Man would be ground into molten iron by these attacks. Young master, I'm afraid something big will happen this time. Ao clan's 5th-grade Emperor-level expert Du Qingyun gasped for breath. His eyes were full of boundless hatred and grief. He was a peak 5th-grade Emperor-level expert. When had he ever suffered such humiliation? He had to watch his old brothers die one by one around him. And he had to run away like an old dog with its tail between its legs. This was a disgrace. But he didn't dare to fight. He was happy to fight. But what about the young master? Who would protect him? What would happen to the Ao clan if the young master was gone? Yes, the Jianghu will be in chaos. Ao Yun's appearance was very haggard, but his eyes were full of worry. Young master, there's something I need to say first. The other 5th-grade Emperor-level expert, Qinzhan, was breathing somewhat heavily. He said with rapt attention, I'm afraid I won't be able to run away if the enemy attacks again. I'll risk my life to stop them. Then young master and old Du, you two quickly leave. Ao Yun's eyes darkened. Qinzhan had been fiercely fighting along the way. So, he had sustained the most injuries. There were at least 7 wounds on his body. And he had taken a saber strike for Ao Yun. Qinzhan didn't need to say anything. He and Du Qingyun had seen everything clearly over the past 3 months. Old Qin. Don't be discouraged. We haven't reached that kind of desperate situation yet, Du Qingyun said with some difficulty. What's the point of talking about this at this time? Qin Zhan smiled freely and said, Old Du, you and I have roamed the Jianghu for our entire lives. We've killed thousands of people. Do you have any regrets? I'll leave the young master to you if the enemy catches up with us. Du Qingyun took a deep breath. He raised his head and looked at the white clouds drifting in the horizon. Then he slowly nodded. And they didn't spare any effort. Tu Qianhao and I used to drink wine in the lower three heavens. But the Tu clan has become my life-threatening hand now. I had also visited the Black Devil clan. The Black Devil clan welcomed me with open arms. The young lord of the Black Devil clan had always been mysterious in front of others. But he had made an exception and revealed his true face to me. He was especially respectful. But the Black Devil clan had used all means to kill me this time. Ao Xieyun spoke in a low voice. The two emperor-level experts listened quietly. The mountain wind was whistling quietly. I had always thought that I had a wide circle of friends. I was generous and I had friends all over the world. But I hadn't expected that the people who had framed me the most at this critical juncture of life and death would be those so-called friends of mine. Ao Xieyun smiled bleakly and said, I'll take this as a warning if I can return to my clan. The two emperor-level experts didn't speak for a long time. Then Du Qingyun heaved a deep sigh and said, Young lord, you can't call someone friend casually. And you can't call someone brother casually either. You've only seen the surface. But you still haven't seen the essence. Benefits. They made friends with you for benefits. And they want to kill you for greater benefits. But they don't necessarily want to kill you for the sake of killing you. They must have some purpose. Qin Zhan propped himself up and spoke earnestly and earnestly. Young lord Tu Qianhao O Du Shao Tianbu Hui. These people call each other brothers. But you're still competitors. Moreover, because you have the title of the #1 clan, even if your strength is really much stronger than theirs and you occupy the title of #1 in the younger generation, they will not sincerely accept you. Therefore you're not friends. There must be a core of true friends or brothers. And there must be a person whom everyone submits to. They must sincerely admire this person. From admiration they must learn from him. From learning they must be convinced. Then they must see others admire him as much as they do. Then they can slowly form a circle around this person, and form the embryonic form of friends. Then they must do some things together under the leadership of this person. Then they will slowly unfold their sincerity towards each other. And they will become brothers. And this brotherhood will become unshakable if they can survive a life and death situation. And this brotherhood will become even stronger if they can continue to experience life and death situations together. You don't have such friends or brothers. You always think that you do. But the people who have come to kill you are your so-called friends. Therefore, the first thing you must learn is that you mustn't believe in your friends and brothers if you don't have enough benefits. I've only seen a few people in your younger generation who are your true friends. Du Qingyun sighed, King of Hell Chu Gu Du Xing, Dong Wushang GMO and Luo Kudi. These people regard King of Hell Chu as their core because they can't do what King of Hell Chu can do. Therefore they submit to him. King of Hell Chu can overturn the entire world with his own strength. And they can't do this. King of Hell Chu's cultivation is much weaker than theirs. But he can catch up with them at the fastest speed. And they can't do it. Therefore they submit to him. It's because I'm drunk, and I'm too happy. My cervical vertebra and spine are old problems. But I'm in good health. My blood pressure is a bit low. My blood pressure is 70%, and my blood pressure is 100%. My brother who's a doctor said, you smoke a bit too much. But you're comparable to a healthy donkey in other aspects. Chapter 560. Young master, if you were King of Hell Chu and were in his position, would you be able to do it? Qin Zhan's words were somewhat impolite, but they were well-intentioned. I can't do it. Ao Xieyun was silent for a long time. Then he finally said it. When he said this, a trace of pain flashed through his eyes, but his heart relaxed. In the past, Ao Xieyun had analyzed the things that happened in the lower three heavens, and the conclusion he came to was, I can't do it. But for some reason, it always felt so far away at that time. But now, the words I can't do it, were spoken from the bottom of his heart. For the proud and arrogant Ao Xieyun, this was the first time in his life that he had truly admitted that he was inferior to others. Du Qingyun gently breathed in. He slowly adjusted his breathing and adjusted his body. Then he said in a solemn voice, and you, young lord, to put it bluntly, your greatest capital isn't your aptitude. Rather, it's your family background. Tu Qianhao, O Du Xiao and the others would think, they might not be worse than you if they were born in the AO clan. That's why they're not convinced. Ao Xieyun muttered, don't tell me that I was born in the AO clan is enough to erase all my efforts? Who could have known that it was precisely because being born in the number one aristocratic family like the AO clan was much more difficult than being born in other clans? If you want to stand out in the AO clan, how much more effort do you have to put in compared to other clans? Qin Zhan was silent for a moment and said, no matter how hard you try, when others mention it, the first thing that comes to mind is the AO clan. Only then will they mention your name. This is the glory and helplessness of being born in a big family. Ao Xieyun pondered for a while. Then he slowly nodded and said, but I'm Ao Xieyun no matter what. I'm also a member of the AO clan. This is a fact that no one can change. Since I can't change it, I might as well accept it. That's right. No matter what, you're still you. You won't change. Qin Zhan happily smiled and said, young lord, I believe that you will definitely surprise the clan when you return. Du Qingyun and Qin Zhan looked at each other, and both of them discovered a trace of sadness in each other's eyes. Yes, after experiencing this pursuit, as long as Ao Xieyun can return to the clan alive, he will definitely change. He will become more mature, more rational, and more ruthless. Unfortunately, the two of them would not be able to see it. The two of them sighed at the same time. Then they smiled faintly. So what if I can see it? So what if he couldn't see it? Ao Xieyun suddenly smiled and said, I'm not as good as King of Hell Chu. I can't do what King of Hell Chu can do. But King of Hell Chu may not be able to do what I can do. Moreover, King of Hell Chu isn't a member of our AO clan. He smiled confidently. Even though he was in a difficult situation, he was still arrogant as he said indifferently, moreover, I have the AO clan and I have all of you. So what if King of Hell Chu is amazing? After all, he has no conflict with us. The current situation is that as long as the three of us can escape, the situation of the entire three heavens will change because of the three of us. At that time, the two uncles will have created the history of the three heavens. Ao Xiyun's eyes were shining. His thoughts were exquisite, and how meticulous were his observations. Naturally, he could tell that the two uncles were facing an absolute dead end. They felt that they were at the end of their rope and had lost their will to fight. I'm afraid that these two people will sacrifice themselves to protect me the next time they encounter an attack. Therefore, they are educating me at such a time. I wish that I can impart all of my life's experience to you in this short moment. But am I Ao Xieyun, a man without conscience? You are risking your life for me. So how can I watch you die? Their will to fight had already collapsed. So, the only thing they could do now was to summon their pride and sense of mission. So they could break out of this dead end and find a way to survive. Sure enough, Du Qingyun and Qin Zhan's eyes lit up as soon as they heard his words. Moreover, we may not necessarily have no chance. Ao Xieyun calmed down and said, we mustn't go in the direction of the Ao clan for the time being. Would be better to go back. Go back? The two asked together. Yes, we will go in the direction of the northern wilderness. Ao Xieyun's eyes flashed. This journey will certainly be beyond their expectations. They expect that we will take a detour back to the Ao clan. Therefore, we won't be able to pass the road ahead even if we take a detour. So, it would be better to retreat. Firstly, we will delay for time if we retreat. Secondly, we will save our lives. Thirdly, the AO clan will certainly send people to look for us if they find out that we haven't returned after the scheduled time limit. And that will be our opportunity. Ao Xieyun smiled and said, I believe that the three of us won't starve to death even in the northern wilderness with our combined strength. That's right. The two men's spirits were lifted. The only thing we can do now is to recuperate, uncles. You must know that I'll only be a corpse if I don't have the two of you, even though I'm the young lord of the Ao clan. What hope will I have if I'm the only one left if you die? Ao Xieyun sincerely heaved a long sigh. Don't worry, young lord. We won't die so easily if we can't see young lord out of danger with our own eyes. The two men looked at each other and made a firm resolution. It's not the time to die yet. Since that's the case, please drink these 2 bottles of Spirit Beast Blood Essence first. Ao Xieyun took out the Spirit Beast Blood Essence from his bosom, and handed it over. This Spirit Beast Blood Essence will be wasted if we don't return for a long time. Uncles, you can recover some of your strength even if you can't comprehend anything if you take it now. Du Qingyun and Qin Zhan were in a dilemma. This was a treasure that the Ao clan desperately needed. The main mission of this trip was to bring back the Spirit Beast Blood Essence. Wouldn't it prove that they didn't have any harvest if they drank it now? But wouldn't it be a waste if they didn't drink it? Wouldn't it lose its effectiveness after a while? Or it would be broken by the enemy in battle? Du Qingyun struggled for a long time. Then he heaved a long sigh and took the 2 bottles. He said, "This is also a matter of necessity. It's an expedient measure. So, the 2 of us will drink it with you, young lord. The 3 of us will drink it equally. As for whether we can comprehend it or not, that's up to fate. It'll depend on our luck." "All right." Qin Zhan readily agreed. "Let's save our lives first, then we'll talk about it later." The 3 men didn't have any more objections. They divided the blood essence between themselves and swallowed it. Unexpectedly, the 3 men opened their eyes 2 hours after they had swallowed the blood essence. Their complexions looked strange. "My injuries have healed, but I haven't comprehended anything. I haven't awakened anything either." Du Qingyun smacked his lips and scratched his scalp. "My injuries have healed by half. But I haven't gained anything either." Qin Zhan's complexion looked better. But he was even more puzzled. "My injuries have healed, but I haven't seen any other signs either." Aoxia Yun's cultivation was the lowest. So, he had recovered the most of the blood essence. But why isn't there any abnormality? The 3 men were extremely depressed. They looked at each other in dismay. They were extremely disappointed. They obviously didn't know that Bulu Qing had taken away half of the blood essence of the spirit beasts in the northern wilderness. And the one they had encountered was one of those spirit beasts. The fact that the blood essence of such a spirit beast could help them recover from their injuries was already very good. Moreover, it couldn't help them comprehend anything else. The 3 men were sighing when Du Qingyun's complexion suddenly changed. He said, "There's movement." The 3 men became vigilant. Then the birds in the distant jungle got startled and swept towards them from 3 directions. "Let's go." They didn't have enough time to sigh or regret anything. So the 3 men rushed towards the rear at the same time. Swish swish, countless hidden weapons suddenly shot towards them from the front. They were blue and purple in color. It was obvious that they had been dipped in poison. Du Qingyun let out a muffled groan. Then he rushed forward without uttering a word. His body slipped and he took off his robe. Then his elemental energy danced in the air and turned into a shield. The 3 men rushed forward like sharp arrows behind this shield. "Stay here." 8 silhouettes appeared in the sky from 4 directions at the same time. And these silhouettes squeezed towards them. A sharp and long whistle resounded in all directions at the same time, and announced to all directions, "The enemy is here." The sound of sleeves fluttering in the air resounded unceasingly. Du Qingyun laughed out loud. Then he shook his arms, and the hidden weapons shot on his robe flew back in all directions like a rain of flowers. Then he straightened his body and fiercely shot out his palm. The 3 men's weapons had already been broken and shattered during the previous siege. So, they could only face the enemy with their bare hands at this moment. The sword light flickered on the opposite side, and the saber light crisscrossed in all directions. Then 2 tall and sturdy silhouettes appeared behind the saber light and sword shadows. They were dressed in black and their faces were covered with murderous aura. Du Qingyun clashed with the 2 men with a bang sound. Then he retreated. Qin Zhan caught up from behind, and patted Du Qingyun's back with a hey sound. Du Qingyun's body stopped retreating. Instead he rushed forward. Qin Zhan pulled Aoxia Yun, and followed behind Du Qingyun. The 3 men took advantage of this fleeting gap like a whirlwind, and crazily rushed out. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Sounds were heard from behind. Qin Zhan fiercely circulated his energy, and the robe behind his body flew out with a bang sound. Then the robe spun as it rushed backwards and blocked the flying hidden weapons. Then he rushed forward without turning his head. He took advantage of the fact that the enemies from the other 3 directions hadn't formed an encirclement, and entered the jungle. Aoxia Yun's body suddenly trembled before they entered the forest. Qin Zhan grabbed Aoxia Yun's back without the slightest hesitation, and pulled out a piece of flesh that had been pierced by a blue poisonous needle. Aoxia Yun's entire body convulsed, but Qin Zhan didn't stop to pick him up. Blood flowed out of his body as he rushed out behind Du Qingyun like a whirlwind. Sharp whistles resounded from all directions behind them. Countless enemies had caught up with them. Chase after them. Kill them at all costs. A cold and ruthless voice sounded. Aoxia Yun was in severe pain. He had almost fainted. Aoxia Yun suddenly felt that this voice was somewhat familiar when he heard this. But he didn't have enough time to think about it. Qin Zhan had already carried him into the jungle, and was rushing towards the extreme north. Chapter 561. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The tide-like experts chased after the buttocks of the three men. The forest was silent. A person walked out from each of the four directions after a long time. Meng Luo, Tu Qianhao, O Du Xiao and Tianbu Hui. They should have gone north. Tianbu Hui's eyes flickered with a dangerous light. Ao Xie is very cautious. He's going in the opposite direction. O Du Xiao waved his hand and sprinkled a white fog. The white fog pervaded the air for a moment, and then fell on the ground. But 3 empty spots appeared on the ground. They should have been here a moment ago. They shouldn't have been able to hold on for long given their injuries. But they've suddenly become lively. So, something must have happened here. O Du Xiao looked at the 3 empty spots where the white fog had appeared. Then he turned his hand and sprinkled a mass of black and odorless fog. The black fog suddenly became colorless when it came in contact with the white fog. Then a few bright red bloodstains appeared on the ground. They were as big as a needle tip and were scattered on the ground. They've taken the blood essence of spirit beasts. O Du Xiao insipidly said. The others were startled by this mysterious method of his. They had once again witnessed the strength of the poison spirit clan. No matter who it was, no one would be able to hide from such a miraculous investigative method. We've joined hands to chase after Ao Xie this time. But we'll become a big joke if we let him escape. Meng Luo smiled in a feminine manner. Chase after him. Suddenly, a sinister voice rang out. If you guys are still just following behind and giving advice after the fact, Ao Xie will never die. They looked towards the source of the voice, and saw a black-clothed and masked figure standing on a treetop. He was fluttering in the wind. It was the young black devil. He sneered. Then he soared up like a black cloud and chased towards the north. Humph! The 4 men snorted at the same time. But they didn't dare to be negligent. They got up at the same time and chased towards the north. We'll reach the chill wind forest after we cross this steep gorge. Gu Duxing was sweating profusely. It wasn't easy to carry 2,000 kilograms of star iron. Should we look for trouble with the O clan? GMO and Luo Kudi were somewhat eager to give it a try. I don't think that with the strength of the 7 of us, we have the strength and qualifications to provoke a big family. Dong Wuxiang snorted and said, if the 2 of you are itching to go, you can go together. We won't accompany you. GMO and Luo Kadi simultaneously stuck out their tongues. We don't need to look for trouble with them. I'm afraid that they themselves will look for trouble with us. Gu Duxing calmly said, the O clan won't dare to passively face our retaliation. Not bad. Chu Yang nodded approvingly, we must be careful. Everyone had been on high alert all along the way. However, they hadn't expected that they would pass through the chill wind forest without any mishap. Gu Duxing and the others also went in to pay their respects. Why is there no movement? No matter what, there should be an ambush, right? Was the O clan so cowardly? You don't even dare to lay an ambush? Luo Kadi scratched his ears and cheeks. Everyone had passed through the chill wind forest, and had arrived in front of the mountain. Second young Master Luo had felt that his strength had grown very fast during this period of time. So, he had been looking for an opportunity to show off his strength. Sigh. Chu Yang heaved a deep sigh. Then he fiercely glared at Luo Kadi. Why do I feel that you have a super crow mouth? Chu Yang received a prompt from the sword spirit as soon as Luo Kadi had finished speaking. There is a large number of enemies lying in ambush in front of the mountain. Remove the star iron. Start to rest and prepare for battle. Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang immediately became alert as Chu Yang waved his hand. Is there an ambush? There is an ambush. Chu Yang fiercely stood behind the tree. He held his breath. There isn't just an ambush. There is a large number of ambushes. Everyone glared at Luo Kudi at the same time. Luo Kudi blinked his eyes. He felt somewhat dizzy. I can't be so powerful, right? Did I really call out an ambush with just a few casual words? Tan Tan shrugged his shoulders and came over. He then raised his nose and said, You small shrimps of King Level 5, step back. See how this great master shakes them with his fart. Tan Tan would have been beaten up by a group of people if it hadn't been for the fact that this was a very special time. Tan Tan Butong, you 2 go in that direction. Wuxiang Kadi, you 2 go in that direction. Duxing GMO, follow me. We will cover for you. Pay attention. The ambush should be 3,000 feet away. You are free to attack and kill once you get close. Chu Yang gave the order without the slightest hesitation. Chu Yang would have said in the past, listen to my orders and move in unison. Don't alert the enemy by any means. However, Chu Yang could only let his brothers move freely at this time. They had reached the time to shape their own fighting style. So they would only lose their own style if Chu Yang blindly restricted them. And they would never be able to stand alone if they lost their unique style. Everyone silently looked at each other after they had rested for a while. Then Tan Tan and Rui Butong rushed out from the other side like two cheetahs. Dong Wuxiang held the black saber in his hand. Luo Kuti's long sword was hidden behind his elbow. They also silently disappeared. Gu Duxing, Chu Yang, and GMO moved at the same time. Chu Yang was in front, and Gu Duxing and GMO were behind him. Gu Duxing and GMO were completely stunned after they had taken a dozen or so steps. Chu Yang's body seemed to have turned into a twisted wisp of green smoke in front of them. He moved like a snake through the dense forest. He didn't make the slightest sound from top to bottom. It seemed that his huge body didn't even touch a single tree. Well, even if he did touch a tree, the sound he made wasn't like the sound of a human body colliding with a tree. Instead, it was a slight cha-cha sound. It seemed as if a small bird had landed on a tree and stepped on it. You must remember to move stealthily in the dense forest. First, every tree has its own growth direction. You must change your position at any time if you don't want to be discovered. Then, you must move forward along the growth direction of this tree. Chu Yang indifferently said. Then, his palms silently chopped two big trees on either side of him. With chips flew everywhere. You see, the tree grain of this tree is horizontal. You see, the trees on this tree are different. But, the parts where the stems are connected are certainly horizontal. You will make a loud sound if you touch such a tree from any other direction. And an experienced Jianghu person will immediately become alert. But, if you touch it horizontally in the direction of its growth and fall, the sound it makes will be the sound of a tree falling naturally. And, the tree on this side is somewhat spiraling. This kind of tree tends to fall later. So, when I pass by this kind of tree, I use a spiraling force. Chu Yang explained little by little, and this phenomenon can be clearly seen from the bark of the tree. Gu Duxing and GMO carefully observed as they moved forward. Then they nodded. As for your feet, don't just think about breathing. You must also pay attention to the direction of the wind and the growing position of the grass. If you are under the tree, it will inevitably tilt in the opposite direction. Follow this tilt and wind direction. Even if you don't breathe, the sound you make will not be loud. If you adapt to this direction, there will be no sound at all. Chu Yang continued to move forward. When there is sunlight like this, you must pay attention to the color of your clothes, the shape of the trees behind you, and the mottled shadows of the trees in front of you. Once the enemy looks over, you must immediately take advantage of these and stand in a suitable position. Even if you don't hide anything, your body will turn into a part of the forest under these mottled rays of light. So the enemy won't be able to see you face to face. As he said this, Chu Yang made a move. He quickly moved from his current position to the opposite side. Although he was facing the sunlight, Gu Duxing and GMO shockingly discovered that under the illumination of the sunlight, Chu Yang's black clothes seemed to have turned into a big tree. It was impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. Even his face was covered by the shadow of the tree. There was light and there was darkness. If they didn't know that Chu Yang was hiding there, they wouldn't have been able to find him. Everyone knows that the night is the best time to sneak around. But, in this mountain forest, a sunny day with the sun is the best time to hide. Because the rays of the sun can turn anything into anything other than its original form. Chu Yang casually said, "Now the two of you follow my pace. We will rush in front of the enemy while they are staring at us." These words weren't bold and visionary. But, Gu Duxing and GMO felt a surge of blood in their hearts when they heard these words. It seemed that a bloodthirsty murderous aura had fiercely awakened after these words were spoken. "Let's go." 3 silhouettes shot out like arrows from a bow. They crossed 1,000 feet in a flash. Then they crossed another 50 feet, and got closer. Even closer. 50 people. Sword Spirit had already reported the exact number. Chu Yang's body made an illusion due to the reflection of the sunlight. He looked like a big lizard as he climbed to the top of the mountain. Then he got within 300 feet of the enemy. Gu Duxing and GMO also followed him. The three of them looked forward and were startled. What's going on? The three of them looked at each other in dismay. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Most of these people are from the O clan. There's no doubt about this. The cold aura of the Poison Spirit clan can't be imitated by others. This ambush is indeed an ambush. Moreover, the lineup is quite large. Chu Yang had already felt that this was a thorny problem at first glance. There were at least 15 king-level experts. Moreover, the auras of 4 of them were unfathomable. 10 king-level experts. The rest are revered martial artists. There are also 4 Emperor-level experts. 2 are 2nd grade and 2 are 3rd grade, Sword Spirit clearly reported. Chu Yang didn't find it strange that there were 4 Emperor-level experts. But the thing that really surprised him was, why are they facing the opposite direction if they are ambushing us? They were facing Chu Yang's side. And they were facing their backs and buttocks. These ambushing experts were stretching their necks to look forward. Some of them were sitting cross-legged in a calm and composed manner. However, they were also showing their backs to Chu Yang and the others. What kind of ambush is this? Chu Yang felt very flabbergasted. You have come to intercept and kill us. But you're facing us with your buttocks. This is the first time I've seen such a strange ambush. Motherfucker, do you want to collectively fart and suffocate us to death? Chapter 562. The 3 of them looked at each other. They were baffled. GMO opened his mouth and almost laughed out loud. Motherfucker, this is the first time I've seen someone ambush with their buttocks. A gust of south wind blew, and a faint voice drifted over along with the wind. Why aren't they here yet? Don't worry. There was a delay on the way. Pay attention. What's that over there? Fuck, a rabbit? Motherfucker. The corner of Chu Yang's mouth twitched. The 2 3rd-grade Emperor-level experts suddenly stood up. They seemed to have sensed something and looked around suspiciously. They shook their heads and laughed in self-mockery. Then they separated into 2 groups and walked over to check the ambush. It seemed that they were very attentive. Chu Yang, Gu Duxing, and the other 2 were even more confused. We are behind your buttocks. Why are you looking in front of you? They heard the Emperor-level expert ask in a deep voice, have you checked the poison field? Has it failed? A King-level expert behind a tree replied in a low voice, Elder, rest assured. I have checked it 3 times. I have also checked the poison field twice. It's absolutely safe. There's absolutely no problem. Well, make sure that we don't get discovered in advance. We can't use our full strength on the periphery. These guys are very vigilant. We can slip away in case there's any sign of trouble. We must make sure that nothing goes wrong this time. The Emperor-level expert nodded and reminded. Yes. The 2 men circled around and returned to their original positions. Chu Yang quietly crouched in the underbrush and remained motionless. Since he didn't move, GMO and Gu Duxing naturally didn't move either. Suddenly, the 2 black-clothed men stood up from their original ambush place and made a hand gesture. That Emperor-level expert frowned and shouted in a low voice, Where are you going? I'm going to pee. That Emperor-level expert's face suddenly revealed a disgusted look. He waved his hand and said in a bad mood, Go further away. The 2 revered martial artists repeatedly nodded in agreement. They walked side by side and stepped on the ground with shwa 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 sounds. They walked for more than 300 feet and the forest covered the road. Then they stopped. One of them said, Motherfucker, we've been preparing here for half a month and we haven't seen a single soul. Another person sighed and removed his belt. Let's wait. It's better if they don't come. Once they come, damn. Which one of them is easy to deal with? That's true. The one who spoke earlier had already taken out his weapon. He closed his eyes, held his breath and prepared to fire. Pitter-patter-patter. Second Master Ji was furious. He is lying in the bushes, motionless. But these 2 fellows are walking towards him. He opened his eyes slightly and saw 4 small legs in front of him. The next moment, a hot water arrow accurately landed on the left side of his face. The force behind the arrow was extremely fast. Warm droplets of that thing splashed up along with the strong release, splashing onto Second Master Ji's face. Second Master Ji's lungs were about to explode. Following which, another hot water arrow accurately landed on the right side of his face. Second Master Ji could no longer tolerate this. Because although the previous one was disgusting, it was still white and shiny. But this one was as red as the Yellow River as if it was sick. And the smell was even stronger. GMO was instantly filled with grief and indignation. The 3 of us came together, but why did you only pee at me? Aren't you fucking bullying us? The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. Finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer and stood up. These 2 revered martial artists were currently peeing with their eyes closed. They were peeing to their heart's content. They had been holding back for a long time, and they felt an indescribable sense of comfort. But who would have thought that they would come out alive from the 2 streams of urine? The shock was no small matter. The 2 of them immediately opened their eyes, and their eyeballs bulged out at the same time. In their extreme nervousness, the 2 water arrows also lost their momentum. They peed into their crotches and stopped. Just as they were about to call out, Second Master Ji's hands, which were filled with anger, grabbed their throats. With a slight puff sound, their necks were strangely tilted to one side. Second Master Ji's violent energy had already rushed into their meridians, and sealed off all movements in their lower bodies. The two of them only trembled twice before they died an unnatural death. Until now, their hands were still in the posture of strangling the birds. They didn't have time to change their posture. Walala. The stream of water that had been cut off by the shock suddenly continued to spray out after its owner had lost consciousness. This time, not a single bit was wasted. All the remaining water splashed onto Second Master Ji's crotch. Second Master Ji's mouth was crooked and his eyes were slanted. He gritted his teeth in hatred but didn't dare to make a sound. A voice came from afar. "What's wrong?" It turned out that he had vaguely heard the commotion here. GMO was stunned. How should he answer? Suddenly, a low and angry voice said, "This bastard peed on my crotch." It was the voice of the revered martial artist who had spoken first. GMO was greatly surprised. He turned his head and saw Chu Yang's mouth moving as he spoke. It was rare for King of Hell Chu to imitate this person's tone so vividly. GMO came to his senses. He hastily muttered vaguely, "Isn't this an accident? I didn't do it on purpose." "Look at how anxious you are," Chu Yang angrily said. "An accident? Both of my crotches are wet." GMO almost suffered internal injuries. "Motherfucker. The one whose crotches are wet is me, isn't it?" There was a rumbling sound from the other side. Someone laughed in a low voice and took pleasure in other people's misfortune. That Emperor-level expert didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He cursed and didn't speak anymore. However, the other people started to move. One of them whispered, "Why did that guy pee on other people's crotch?" His voice was full of feigned surprise. Another person muttered in a pensive tone, "According to my conjecture, he may have peed on the wrong side." But why did he pee on the wrong side? That person seemed even more surprised. He couldn't understand. "According to my conjecture, there are some reasons behind this," that pensive voice said. "What reasons?" The surprised voice continued to ask. "You wanted to get to the bottom of this matter." Firstly, if this guy suddenly thought of something when he was sleeping last night and there is clearly no proper channel here, he is holding it in for a long time, and it is easy for a deformity to appear. If he drinks water in the morning, it is possible for him to pee on the wrong side. I see. I'm convinced. But what's the second reason? As for the second reason, it is very hard to say. Some people, if there is no proper channel for a long time, will use a very strange method. They will charge forward with a spear and use their own method to get rid of their inner demons. And after getting rid of their inner demons, it is easy for them to experience a period of weakness. In this period of weakness they will pee on the wrong side. Such penetrating insight. I'm convinced. You flatter me. There was a rumbling sound and laughter could be heard everywhere. Although they didn't dare to be loud, it was a little chaotic. Many people were lying on the ground, laughing silently until their bodies were trembling and spasming. Chuyang, Gu Duxing and GMO were stunned. This is a fucking group of talents. It looks like this group of people has really been holding it in for a long time. Others were just peeing, and they were actually quoting the classics and analyzing for a long time before starting a lesson seriously. Chuyang stood up and gently laid down the two corpses with GMO. Then Chuyang walked out in front, grumbling in a low voice, "Fuck, look at my two pants. They're so cold. What do you want me to do? To think that you guys are laughing so happily?" When he said this, more laughter could be heard. A few people turned around and said, "That's the fate between the two of you?" These people turned around, but they could only see Chuyang and Gu Duxing's black clothes. They couldn't see their faces. Their faces were completely covered by the trees. Someone even said jokingly, "It's rare for the two of you to be so close to each other even when peeing." When he said this, laughter could be heard everywhere. At this time, Chuyang was laughing as he approached a guy at the edge of the crowd. He talked as he walked, and his voice was so vivid that no one realized that it was fake. No one noticed that he had deviated a little. "Fuck, next time, no matter what, I won't pee with him anymore." Chuyang laughed in a low voice. He was a little regretful, a little embarrassed, and a little angry. However, the sword in his hand flew out and silently stabbed into the guy's ribs from 30 feet away. It pierced through his heart and lungs, nailing his body firmly to the ground. This person was completely unprepared. How could he have thought that his comrade would actually kill him? A moment ago he was still laughing in a low voice. The next moment he felt a piercing pain in his ribs. He was just about to cry out in pain when fresh blood suddenly poured into his lungs. Then, a strong wave of vital energy rushed into his meridians and took control of his central nervous system. Then his eyes silently bulged, and he stopped breathing. Chu Yang laughed in annoyance. He walked over and scolded jokingly, "Look at you. Is it worth it for you to laugh until you stop breathing when someone pees?" As he said this, he laughed. His laughter was calm, intimate, and somewhat resentful. However, he secretly pulled out the sword from the guy's body and stuck it to his back. Then he shook his head and sighed as he walked in the direction of the other guy behind the mountain rock. His footsteps were light and heavy. It was as if he was walking in his own headquarters. GMO followed behind him. He could only feel his little heart beating wildly. "Oh my God, today I have really seen what it means to kill someone while talking and laughing." The most amazing thing was that he still looked really relaxed before and after killing someone. There was absolutely no reluctance, and absolutely no trace of murderous aura. The guy behind the mountain rock was laughing so hard that his stomach hurt. He was also the one who laughed the hardest. Chu Yang scolded angrily, "Fuck, isn't it just a small matter? Look at you laughing like a fur seal. Are old jokes so funny? I must teach you a lesson today." Chapter 563. That person laughed and said, "Motherfucker, can't you stand it when I laugh at you? You actually want to cause trouble for me? You've really got guts." He laughed as he turned around. What he saw was a bright and condensed sword light. In a flash, it pierced his throat. One ray of cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms. Chu Yang followed the sword momentum and fiercely pounced on his body. Then he heavily punched his body. He laughed and said, "I'll let you laugh." That person's body twisted and spasmed strangely. Then he stopped moving. His eyes were wide open. They were full of disbelief. Apparently, he never dreamed that his companion, who was joking with him just a moment ago, would suddenly become a killer. "I'm a king-level master and this guy is just a revered martial artist. How can he kill me? Why does he want to kill me?" With all these questions, this king-level master died with his eyes wide open. Chu Yang laughed mischievously. He jumped up from his body and punched GMO. GMO fell to the ground. He gasped for breath. You're still laughing?" GMO was a clever person. He kicked Chu Yang's stomach and sent him flying. Then he gasped for breath. "You're allowed to be peed on, but I'm not allowed to laugh?" Then he pounced on Chu Yang. Puff puff puff, Chu Yang screamed, "You're done laughing." "Ouch, you kicked my balls." Suddenly everyone around burst into laughter. Several busybodies couldn't bear it. They stood up from their seats and walked over. Everyone couldn't help but smile. Someone laughed as he walked. "Motherfucker, you're so righteous even after being peed on. This is the first time I've seen someone like that. Did you pee on your head?" Chu Yang said angrily, "Try peeing on your crotch. Your crotch is wet. How strange." You hiss. "Motherfucker, you hit my crotch." Haha. Suddenly there was another burst of laughter. 7 or 8 people walked over quickly. Everyone was in high spirits. When he arrived, he saw 2 black-clothed men rolling on the ground. One of them was covering his crotch and curling up like a shrimp, while the other was on top of him, punching him. A middle-grade king-level expert restrained himself from laughing. He then said in a dignified manner, "Why aren't you getting up? What have you become?" As soon as the order was given, the 2 immediately jumped up obediently. Not only did they jump up, but they also jumped exceptionally high and split into 2 different directions. At the same time, 2 bright sword lights flashed out, causing the entire forest to be illuminated with a bright white light. GMO had fused with his sword. His entire body had transformed into a god of death that had rushed out from hell. His entire body was covered with an indestructible sword energy. Then he ferociously rushed towards the 3 king-level experts on his side with an earth-shattering momentum. It was as if a mountain was crashing down. As long as Chu Yang wielded his sword of calamity, what harm was there in slaughtering the entire world? This move was brazen. It had transformed into a wild dragon that could overturn rivers and seas. The sword had just attacked and a burst of sword light shot out. Then it soared high into the sky. It was as if the Milky Way was hanging upside down, and a meteor was flying through the sky. The king-level expert who bore the brunt of the attack had a smile on his face. But then, his heart was pierced with a puff sound. Then his body was torn apart. A head with a bright smile on his face flew into the air. The second king-level expert was immediately enveloped by the sword light. He was completely defenseless. The smile on his face froze. He didn't even have time to turn into panic before he was sent flying. The third king-level expert only had time to issue a blood-curdling scream before a bloody hole appeared on his body. Then, it was the fourth king-level expert. This king-level expert finally had enough time to react. He hastily pulled out his sword from its sheath. He didn't have time to form any technique. So he desperately used his sword to block. The Calamity sword fiercely rushed over. Then a soft crack sound was heard, and the sword was broken into pieces. A blood-curdling scream was heard as the king-level expert's arm was twisted into powder. Then Chu Yang rushed into the king-level expert's bosom with his sword. A mass of sword light mixed with countless pieces of flesh and blood spread out. The air was already filled with dense blood mist. Chu Yang didn't stop. He still used the "what harm is there in slaughtering the entire world" move. He fiercely attacked the remaining king-level expert. That king-level expert repeatedly issued a sharp scream. He raised his hand and a mass of black fog spread out. Then he raised his hand again and a mass of white fog was fiercely released. In the blink of an eye, all kinds of poisonous fog had already filled this space. He madly used poison techniques and all kinds of hidden weapons. As he retreated, he screamed in panic and pulled out his sword. Chu Yang's eyes narrowed. He didn't stop and he rushed into the poisonous fog. The sword energy filled the air and the poisonous fog spread. Chu Yang had already rushed out. The shining sword light had already arrived in front of this king-level expert. This king-level expert screamed. He fiercely threw out the long sword in his hand. Then he turned around and ran. Facing the might of Chu Yang's sword and seeing the miserable state of his companion, he didn't even have the courage to block it. He directly ran away. The tip of Chu Yang's sword sank. It suddenly changed from, "What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world?" to, "What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world?" The sword light converged and it immediately flew into the sky. It was as if a peerless sword that had been buried for 10,000 years had suddenly been unearthed. It revealed its peerless sharpness. Poof! The sword light was still shining in midair. The sword energy had already rushed into the back of the king-level expert who was running away. That king-level expert trembled. His face was full of despair. He struggled and shouted, "Help!" However, the rainbow-like sword light pierced through his back as soon as these two words left his mouth. Then Chu Yang rushed out of his body along with his sword and landed 50 feet away. His sword was slanted towards the ground, and the blood droplets on the sword's blade dripped down with a schwa sound. With a bang, the body of this king-level expert was torn apart. His face was still full of panic and despair. His big head had already rolled several times on the ground. On the other side, GMO withdrew his sword. In front of him was a pile of badly mutilated corpses. Two king-level experts and a revered martial artist had been caught off guard by the sword light of his body and sword at the same time. Silence. There was an indescribable silence in the forest. The dense fog of blood and the poisonous fog hadn't had time to disperse. They were undulating in the air. He wanted to prove to everyone what kind of unbearable tragedy had just happened. Who would have thought that two people had gone to pee, and had attracted such a vicious and merciless god of death? In the blink of an eye, 8 human lives had become nothing more than a wisp of smoke. Bastard! A tall and sturdy figure roared furiously. It was a second-grade Emperor-level expert. He was so angry that he couldn't control himself. He jumped out of his hiding place. His face was distorted as he asked, "You? Who are you people?" "The people who want your life," a cold voice replied. Then, the tip of a sword suddenly appeared in front of him. Then it was fiercely pulled back. Then a palm hit his back with great force. This Emperor-level expert's face was full of disbelief. His body was violently hit and he was sent flying. He still couldn't believe that he had been fatally injured. He roared and pulled out his sword in the air. Then he fiercely mobilized all the energy in his body. With a puff sound, 2 perfectly round arrows of blood spurted out from his front and back. All the strength in his body was sucked out at the same time. He was like a sack that had been emptied and he fell from the sky. He fell to the ground with a puff sound. Then he desperately raised his head and turned his neck to look behind him. "Who is it?" "It's me." Following a voice that was so calm that it was cruel, a black-clothed youth quietly walked out. The moment he appeared, a cold and sharp aura suddenly appeared. It was as if a sword had walked out instead of a person. A human-shaped sword. It was Gudu Xing. He had taken advantage of the moment when GMO and Chu Yang had attracted everyone's attention to quietly sneak into the inner circle. Then he made his move and it was indeed a success. Originally, Gudu Xing's target was the 2 third-grade Emperor-level experts. However, the two of them were too vigilant. Moreover, they were too calm. Gudu Xing was afraid that if he didn't make his move, it would ruin his plan. Now that this guy had jumped out, how could Gu Duxing let him go? No matter what, he was still a second-grade Emperor-level expert. Killing him would be a huge blow to the enemy's fighting strength. The three brothers stood in a triangular formation. Below their feet were scattered pieces of corpses. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. All the people who had been lying in ambush came over at the same time and surrounded the three of them. They surrounded them quietly. Everyone's eyes were filled with uncontrollable anger. These three people had killed their comrades as soon as they appeared. Two of them had been assassinated silently. As for the two who had gone to pee earlier, no one thought that they were still alive. Because that was absolutely impossible. There were 50 people in total, but 13 of them had already died. They had died under despicable assassination and sneak attack. Who are you people? That third-grade Emperor-level expert quietly appeared. His eyes were filled with intense indignation as he looked at Chu Yang. GMO laughed mischievously and said, "This question is really interesting. You have so many people lying in ambush here. Aren't you trying to kill us? Now that we have come out, you actually ask us who we are? Old man, is your brain damaged?" The third-grade king-level expert was extremely angry. But he couldn't help but be startled. Ambush you? He suddenly became furious. Who do you think you are? Do you think that this old man has come here to ambush you? GMO was startled. He then said while stammering, "Don't tell me, you aren't people of the O clan?" "We are obviously people of the O clan." The third-grade Emperor-level expert angrily said, "Who are you? Which clan are you from? Bastard. Why didn't you ambush us since you are from the O clan?" GMO scratched his head. He had a tangled look on his face. This isn't right. Who are you here to deal with? The third-grade Emperor-level expert almost fainted from anger. He angrily said without thinking, "I was waiting here to capture Ao Xie. Who do you think you are?" GMO was startled. He couldn't help but look apologetic. He repeatedly waved his hand and said, "Oh, this is really a misunderstanding. This is a misunderstanding." Chapter 564. Chu Yang and Gu Duxing were also startled. We were fighting to the death for a long time. But the other side didn't deal with us? So we ended up taking the blame for Ao Xie. What's this? Motherfucker, what kind of friendship do I have with Ao Xie? The people of O clan and the few people of Hayam O clan who had come to assist felt dizzy. You have already chopped up so many of our people. But you still have the nerve to say that this is a misunderstanding? This motherfucker's mouth is really amazing. Once you open your mouth, you are the sky. But once you close your mouth, you are the earth. GMO frowned. He then said with a bitter face, "Fuck brothers, you see? I'm really sorry. Who is Ao Xie? What kind of thing is he? We don't know him from the start. Don't you think so?" Cough cough. This is a big misunderstanding. He touched his nose and mischievously smiled. He then awkwardly said, "You see, how about we apologize to you? Say sorry, and let this matter go? Isn't it? Let it go? It's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive." GMO's words became more and more earnest as he spoke. That third-grade Emperor-level expert of O clan almost went crazy with anger. "What are you talking about? You killed people. And you want to let it go with just a sorry? It's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive? What kind of bullshit is this?" GMO said in a very serious manner, "Senior, as the saying goes, the dead can't be brought back to life. So please restrain your grief. After all, we're dead now. But their heads have already fallen off. Moreover, we have to show our sincerity in order to win your understanding." "What sincerity?" That Emperor-level expert looked at the expressions on the faces of the three people. And he finally believed that this was a misunderstanding. "You see," GMO cautiously probed, "we were careless and killed 13 of your people. So we have decided to compensate you with 13 coffins. No matter what, we have to bury the dead in peace. Leaving their corpses in the wilderness is too cruel. What else?" That third-grade Emperor-level expert heard this. He saw that GMO had paused. So he couldn't help but ask. "No," GMO said with a bitter face, "you see, we're outside. We don't have anything with us. And we're being used as scapegoats. We're also being wronged. How can we explain this? Do we really want to kill that much? We are not homicidal maniacs. You killed 13 of our men and you're giving us 13 coffins as compensation? Nothing else?" That third-grade Emperor-level expert finally exploded. He stomped his foot and roared, "Bastard! Are you toying with this old man? We wouldn't dare." GMO's face was sullen. "Really? There's no other way. We don't have any money. How about this? Let's take a step back. If this unfortunate man has any family members, we can also take care of them. For example, if he has a young and beautiful sister or daughter, we can also take care of them comfortably. Bastard. You were really playing with me. The third-grade king-level expert flew into a rage. A wisp of smoke rose from his forehead. Ah, old bastard. GMO laughed out loud. He jumped up and patted the old man. He said, "You old bastard. If I don't play with you, then who do I play with? You've lived for so long. But you've been living like a fucking dog all this time. You're a stubborn old man with a knot in his head. You're an unenlightened fool. You've lived for 1,000 years, but you're still a bastard. You deserve to be played with." That third-grade emperor-level expert was so angry that his entire body was convulsing. He was almost unable to breathe. His lips trembled as he said, You're a junior. I won't be Omu Feng if I don't dismember your body into thousands of pieces today. Omu Feng, what's wrong with you? Omu Feng, you motherfucker. GMO spat out a mouthful of saliva. He then put his hands on his waist and said, "Old bastard, old turtle. Come on, come on. Are you happy? Oh, dog ant. This is GMO. This is King of Hell Chu's group. And the one with the sword is Gudu Xing." Someone finally recognized GMO. This dog ant had become his signature phrase. And this exposed second young Master Ji's true identity. "Oh, I'm your father, your ancestor." GMO put his hands on his waist and looked up to the sky and laughed heartily. "I haven't come out of Jianghu for a long time. And I was wondering if my charm had declined. But no one had recognized me even after so long. But I'm finally relieved now. Not bad. You deserve a reward." Omu Feng's belly exploded with anger. Suddenly, a guy jumped out and looked at Chu Yang. "How come only the three of you are here? Where are the others?" This old man was Omu Feng's elder brother, O Jin Feng. He vigilantly looked all around as he spoke. King of Hell Chu had gone to the northern wilderness with several people. So, how come only these three are here now? The others are here. It wasn't Chu Yang who had said this. Instead, two people had spoken in unison. A mournful and dazzling saber light impressively appeared along with these words. And a sharp sword light also rushed out at the same time. Dong Wuxiang's sturdy body was impressively revealed like pig iron. Just by standing there, it gave people the feeling that a mountain range made of iron had suddenly appeared in front of them. Dong Wuxiang coldly snorted. He waved his saber, and a revered martial artist and a king-level expert on his left got chopped into 4 pieces. Then he waved his saber to the right and smashed them down. Yes, it was smashed. The black saber weighed more than 250 kilograms. So, its might couldn't be displayed without the word, smashing. The two experts on the right desperately tried to block it. Their swords were broken with a kacha sound. Then their heads were separated with a bang sound. Dong Wuxiang's majestic body was dripping with blood. He took a big step forward and shouted, "Get lost." A middle-grade king-level expert bore the brunt of his attack. Dong Wuxiang's saber chopped down like a thunderbolt. This king-level expert bellowed, "You're the one who should get lost." He brandished his sword to meet Dong Wuxiang's attack head-on. A loud clang sound was heard, and the sword shattered into pieces of iron. Then this middle-grade king-level expert rolled out like a rubber ball on the ground. He repeatedly spat out blood with a wah sound. This was exactly what Dong Wuxiang had said, "Get lost." Dong Wuxiang didn't move an inch. His majestic body was like a towering mountain. He disdainfully snorted and walked in with big strides. A 5th-grade saber king against a middle-grade king-level expert. And a middle-grade king-level expert had been sent flying in a single exchange. Moreover, he had been seriously injured. This was a miracle in anyone's eyes. That king-level expert was a middle-grade king-level expert. However, Dong Wuxiang was a genuine peak 5th-grade saber king. Moreover, he had suppressed his strength to prevent him from making a breakthrough. Dong Wuxiang would have been an 8th-grade saber king if he hadn't suppressed his strength. Dong Wuxiang's black saber weighed more than 250 kilograms. Moreover, he had innate divine strength. So, it would have been strange if he hadn't been able to send a middle-grade king-level expert flying even if he had used the sword. Luo Kudi's sword light was like a viper on the other side. Shwa, shwa, shwa. It swept past 3 people in quick succession. A thin trace of blood appeared on the throats of the 3 people at the same time. Then a gorgeous blood light violently shot out. The 3 corpses slowly fell down. Luo Kudi had already clashed with another king-level expert at this time. Luo Kudi's body somersaulted in the air and entered the encirclement. He was standing beside Gu Duxing. The temperaments of these two people were somewhat similar at this moment. Both of them were like sharp swords. However, there were still some differences if one were to carefully distinguish them. Gu Duxing was like a peerless divine weapon with restrained sharpness. He was standing motionless, but his sharpness was faintly discernible. He was ready to draw his sword at any time. On the other hand, Luo Kudi was like a blood-stained sharp sword that was ready to kill. His body was emitting an intense bloodthirsty aura. His ferocious aura was soaring to the sky. Good. Very good. All of you are finally here. Omu Feng slowly nodded. The murderous aura in his eyes was getting more and more intense. We didn't catch Ao Xie Yun. So, we took the corpses of the three of you back. It's an unexpected harvest. It's a great merit. Chu Yang mischievously smiled. You want to rely on these defeated troops of yours? You want to deal with us? Omu Feng, are you sure that you aren't dreaming? You must know that we killed 22 of your people. And we didn't even suffer a single injury. We'll pay a price to annihilate all of you here. Don't tell me that we can't do it? It wasn't an exaggeration to say that these were defeated troops of theirs. 50 people had been lying in ambush here. And 22 of them had died at the hands of these 5 people. It could be said that less than half of them had been eliminated. Moreover, Gu Duxing had killed an emperor-level expert with top-notch fighting strength. You are merely 5 king-level experts. You may have Sword King and Saber King, but you're nothing more than this. You can't be an emperor-level expert's opponent no matter what. Moreover, Brother Su Wushuang, the emperor-level expert of the Black Devil clan, is here in addition to us brothers. Even if you have wings you will still die. Omu Feng didn't need to say so much. But Chu Yang's words were an extremely fierce attack on his heart. And it was an extremely heavy blow to his subordinates. It was inevitable that some people would become dejected if he didn't refute them. Go. Kill them. O Jin Feng bellowed, kill them ruthlessly for this old man. The first person to attack wasn't anyone from the O clan. Instead it was Chu Yang. Chu Yang would never let go of such an opportunity. It wasn't known when a long sword had appeared in his hand. The sword light spread and a cold light whizzed out. It suddenly transformed into 10,000 sword lights and rushed forward. One cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms. O Jin Feng shouted loudly. He pulled out his sword and rushed forward. But a person's silhouette flashed in front of him. Then an iron tower-like body came forward to greet him. Then a black light transformed into a lightning and thunder above his head, and fiercely hacked down. It was Dong Wushang. He coldly said, Old thing. Second Master Dong is the one who sent you on your way. Don't look for someone else. Otherwise you'll become a confused ghost on the road to hell. A dignified emperor-level expert has become a confused ghost. And you don't even know who killed you. You'll be very disgraced. O Jin Feng furiously shouted. Chu Yang had already turned his body. He took advantage of the momentum of one cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms, and made a turn in the air. Then an extremely swift and fierce sword light flew out of his hand. What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? Chapter 565. The World Defying the Heavens is written by Wind Conquers the World. If you like this work, please vote for it or collect it. Don't know how to vote or collect it? Please read this post. Let us dance with the wind and clouds and defy the heavens together. Let us read this magnificent chapter together. The revered martial artist closest to Chu Yang didn't even have time to react. His chest was smashed by the thunder-like sword light, and his body was torn to pieces. Chu Yang rushed towards another opponent like a whirlwind and lightning with the sharp whistling of the sword light. Gu Duxing let out a long and loud shout in the field. His sword was like a lonely peak swordsman who had been lonely for 1,000 years. He thrust his sword forward, and met Omu Feng head-on with a lonely atmosphere. Luo Kudi shouted, Awu, Su Wushuang, your second master Luo has come. Why aren't you kneeling down for me? He had gone to meet the second-grade emperor-level expert Su Wushuang. GMO shouted. He turned over and fused with his sword. He rushed into the ranks of the revered martial artists with his sword. This was the plan that the three of them had already decided on with their superb tacit understanding. Dong Wushang, Gu Duxing, and Luo Kudi would do their utmost to entangle the 3 emperor-level experts. GMO and Chu Yang would deal with the remaining experts with quick and decisive moves. Then they would turn around and attack from all sides. Chu Yang didn't consider anything. He attacked with it 10,000 fathoms of cold light. Then he repeatedly displayed the 12 moves of the Tribulation Sword technique. My brothers won't be able to deal with the Emperor-level experts for long. I must end this battle quickly. How sharp is the Tribulation Sword technique? Chu Yang had been able to assassinate a first-grade Emperor-level expert when he was still a first-grade King-level expert. He was now a 5th-grade Sword King. Moreover, he had suppressed his strength. Perhaps he would have become an 8th-grade Sword King if he hadn't suppressed his strength. Using such a cultivation level, such a divine sword, and such a sword technique to fight with these king-level experts and revered martial artists was like bullying them. Wherever Chu Yang passed by, blood would flow, limbs would fly, and heads would roll. A single 1,000 fathoms of cold light. What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? A sharp will never change. Gather the clouds and become the emperor. Over and over again. Minister Chu had gone crazy. Wherever one man and one sword went, even the trees within their line of sight would fall down neatly. For a moment, the mountains shook and the earth shook, rumbling without end. On Ji Mo's side, he was also like a tiger that had entered a flock of sheep. He was hacking and killing and he was howling non-stop. On the other side, Luo Kadi was also howling. It was like a pack of wolves gathering. Only 4 king-level experts were left behind. Chu Yang and Ji Mo didn't hesitate to rush towards those 4 king-level experts from 2 different directions at the same time. On the other side, Mu Feng and the others were so angry that their eyes were about to split open. They were so angry that smoke was coming out of their 7 apertures. Watching his subordinates being slaughtered without being able to put up any resistance, and yet he couldn't do anything about it, it was really depressing. Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, and Luo Kadi were coming and going like butterflies. Mu Feng was still fighting Gu Duxing a moment ago. But a big saber had already come slashing towards him the next moment. And it had turned into Luo Kadi the next moment. These 3 people weren't just cooperating with a tacit understanding. Moreover, they were extremely slippery. They wouldn't fight you head-on. Instead, they would fight you as much as possible. You'd be attacked by these 3 people if you wanted to rush out to help your subordinates. But you'd find out that they had become slippery once you turned around. These 3 people were so angry that they were shouting loudly. But they couldn't do anything about it. Jin Feng saw that one of his subordinates had died under Chu Yang's sword during the fierce battle. So he couldn't help but roar in rage, "Domain!" Mu Feng and Su Wushuang faced upwards and roared. The 3 of them suddenly gathered together and stood in a triangular formation. Then the 3 of them launched their attacks at the same time. Domain. A dense worldly aura suddenly spread out, and formed a huge domain within a radius of several hundred feet. They had thought of this brilliant method to capture Ao Xie Yun. But they hadn't expected that they would use it on these youngsters before they even met Ao Xie Yun. Domain was the difference between a king-level expert and an emperor-level expert. It was also the best way to distinguish them. They could take whatever they wanted inside the domain. Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, and Luo Kadi didn't have enough time to withdraw. But they suddenly felt their bodies stiffen. It seemed as if they were immersed in an extremely viscous liquid. Even turning their bodies was extremely difficult for them. "Junior, give me your life." Mu Feng laughed heartily. Then he, Jin Feng, and Su Wushuang thrust their swords at the same time. Dong Wushang silently roared as he looked at the rapidly approaching swords. Then he suddenly faced upwards and roared. A violent aura swelled out of his chest. Then he struggled with all his might and pounced towards Gu Duxing. Gu Duxing also had the same plan. He struggled with all his might, and the black dragon sword burst out with an intense sword light inside the domain. He struggled unwillingly and rushed towards Luo Kadi. Then he kicked Luo Kadi's body. Emperor-level domain. It was impossible to guard against it. They would undoubtedly die in the current situation. So, they would die with the greatest value if they were going to die. Therefore, Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang chose to sacrifice themselves at the same time in order to let each other out. When Gu Duxing's foot landed on Luo Kadi's body, Dong Wushang's full-force push had already landed on Gu Duxing's back. They couldn't speak inside the domain. Neither could they hear what the other side was saying. But they could see each other's movements clearly. Luo Kadi was kicked out with a puff sound. It was as if a piece of cloth had been torn apart. Luo Kadi looked up to the sky in grief and indignation the moment he got out of the domain. Then 2 streams of tears rolled down. Second brother. Fourth brother. Dong Wushang pounced on Gu Duxing's body. He used all his strength to push Gu Duxing away. He felt a chill on his back. 2 of the 3 swords had streaked across his back. The cuts had penetrated deep into his bones and blood fiercely spurted out. However, his body had deviated from the place where the sword should have pierced his heart because he had sacrificed himself to save others. This could be considered as a great fortune in an unfortunate situation. Sometimes, one would get a chance to live if they disregarded their own life and death to save their loved ones when they were about to die. Therefore, one shouldn't hesitate in the face of life and death. At this moment, Dong Wuxiang truly understood how reasonable this sentence was. But he still felt tremendous pain. The emperor-level sword qi rushed into his body and started to destroy his body and meridians in an instant. Dong Wuxiang suddenly raised his head in pain. His resolute face twitched violently. However, he tightly bit his lips and didn't make the slightest sound. I can't shout. Gudu Xing will rush back if I shout. And I'll die if he rushes back. Chu Yang had finally dealt with all the enemies at this time. So, he desperately rushed over with his sword. What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? Beheading the entire world won't stop the saber. These two tyrannical sword techniques crashed into the emperor-level domain at the same time. This was the first time that Chu Yang had collided with the domain of an emperor-level expert. And it was three at once. Meanwhile, Gudu Xing united with his sword. A hazy black energy sword from the Black Dragon sword. He howled in grief and indignation. Then he disregarded his own life and transformed into a sword light along with his sword. Then he crashed into the emperor-level domain. Luo Kudi and GMO rushed back from another direction at the same time. Dong Wuxiang was inside the domain. He saw his brothers rushing over without regard for their own lives. He exposed a gratified and worried smile on his face. Then his eyes suddenly lit up. He seemed to have thought of something. But he eventually fainted. Chu Yang roared. He transformed into a thunderbolt along with his sword, and crashed into the emperor-level domain. What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? His entire life's cultivation has transformed into a concentrated attack. Meanwhile, Gudu Xing, Luo Kudi, and GMO split into three directions. They avoided Dong Wuxiang and crashed into the emperor-level domain like meteors. King-level experts had collided with the emperor-level domain head-on. This was something that no one had dared to think about in the past. But now, these four youngsters had triggered such a heroic scene for the first time for their brothers to collide with each other. The domain that the three king-level experts had laid down with a concerted effort suddenly caved in under the desperate attacks of these four people with a loud bang. 7 violent forces collided with each other. This domain had already lost half of its power because Gudu Xing, Dong Wuxiang, and Luo Kudi had destroyed it once. So, it had been smashed into pieces in an instant. An earth-shattering explosion was heard. It was as if hundreds of bombs had exploded at the same time. The 7 people who were fighting let out a muffled groan at the same time, and were sent flying. Gudu Xing madly rushed over. He threw out the Black Dragon sword that was as precious as his life. Then he immediately held Dong Wuxiang in his arms. He used his own body to protect Dong Wuxiang and arched his back. Then a violent explosion resounded. A strong impact force rushed over and hit Gudu Xing's back. Gudu Xing felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He fiercely spouted a mouthful of blood. But he still arched his back and forcibly held on. He was sent flying while holding Dong Wuxiang. He used all his cultivation in front of his chest to protect his unconscious brother. Only a pitiful amount of elemental energy was left to protect his back. With a few cracking sounds, his spine broke violently. Gudu Xing spat out another mouthful of blood. His remaining consciousness held Dong Wuxiang tightly. After flying out, he actually turned over with all his might and placed his own body below. He flew out far away and fell heavily on the ground. He used the last of his strength to lift Dong Wuxiang's body up. Then he fainted without a word. And Dong Wuxiang, who was in his arms, rolled out of his arms at the moment when he finally lost consciousness. With the help of his last move, Dong Wuxiang dispelled the gravity of falling from a high altitude. He landed lightly on the ground and after rolling a few times he was actually unscathed. After the explosion, Chu Yang also lost consciousness. Luo Kudi and GMO flew out like rubber balls. The 3 emperor-level experts also drifted down in 3 different directions. They didn't have any power to resist as they were sent flying. Their 5 internal organs had been severely damaged. The 3 of them were barely conscious, but they couldn't even move a finger. But the 3 of them were cruelly happy. Look at those guys, they had obviously lost consciousness. So, the 3 of us should be able to recover before them. Won't we be like fish on the chopping board at that time? Will we be at their mercy? We must catch them alive this time. We must make these bastards beg for death. They can't beg for death. Suddenly, a cold light flashed while they were happily thinking. Su Wushuang was smiling in pain in midair. He screamed, and his upper body was separated from his lower body. He looked over with his remaining consciousness, and saw a thin and small youth jump out with a whooshing sound. He then chased after Omu Feng and shouted, "3 old bastards. I'm a little disappointed. I have 4,000 votes for recommendation now. Aha, I'll explode even if I can't vote. Brothers and sisters, we can't be so lacking." Chapter 566. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless. Another person chased after O Jin Feng like a meteor. He then shouted, "Motherfucker, it's finally my turn. I was almost suffocated to death. Motherfucker, these 3 old bastards dared to hurt my brother." This person had a grotesque appearance. He had one eyebrow facing the sky and the other eyebrow facing the ground. His voice sounded like thousands of hungry wolves that had been thirsty for a month, and hundreds of drakes that had been grabbed by the neck. Su Wushuang finally lost consciousness. His last thought was, "Motherfucker, these bastards still have an ambush?" This voice alone can kill an emperor-level expert. Even if they don't die from the shock, they will die from discomfort. Tan Tan and Rue Butong had beaten up the 2 emperor-level experts effortlessly. Then they rushed back with all their strength. This was the countermeasure that the brothers had discussed before this. The opposite party has ambushed us. So, they naturally know about Chuyang, Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, GMO, Luo Kadi, and the others. But Rue Butong and Tan Tan had met them in the northern wilderness. So, no one knows about them. Therefore, Rue Butong and Tan Tan couldn't appear at the beginning. The 2 of them could only rush out when both sides were seriously injured. Then, they could take control of the situation in one fell swoop. The opposite party hasn't ambushed us. But this strategy is absolutely correct. And it has brought about the greatest effect. So, we can catch all the enemies in one fell swoop. The 2 of them rushed to Chu Yang's side. One of them blocked his front and the other one blocked his back. They circulated their martial power with all their strength, and healed Chu Yang's injuries first. Both of them knew that Chu Yang had a divine power in his body. So, their brothers would be fine as long as he woke up. But, they would be done for if something happened to Chu Yang while they were saving the others. Chu Yang coughed fiercely after a while. He spat out a mouthful of blood and woke up. He looked at Tan Tan and felt relieved. He forced himself to sit up. Then he quickly took out 4 incomplete versions of the heavy pills. Quickly give them to them. 1 pill for each person. Then he took 1 pill for himself and swallowed it. Rue Butong anxiously took the pills. Then he rushed out. He saw Gu Duxing first. And he couldn't help but jump in fright. Gu Duxing's entire body had fallen apart. In fact, he couldn't even be helped. Rue Butong's eyes were filled with tears. He first gave the heavy pill to Gu Duxing, then Dong Wushang, Luo Kadi, GMO. After a long time, GMO and Luo Kadi woke up first. However, Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang were still unconscious. Chu Yang had also recovered a little by now. He propped himself up and walked over. Everyone gathered around the 2 and watched. Both of their injuries are slowly recovering. Even their muscles, bones, muscles can be clearly seen with their eyes. After a long time, Gu Duxing finally opened his eyes. He blinked as if the sunlight above his head was too dazzling. He closed his eyes and asked, "How is Wu Shang?" "I'm fine." Dong Wushang, who had just woken up, said, "Second brother, how are you?" "I'm fine." A rare smile appeared on Gu Duxing's cold face. He tried to move his hand, then raised his arm and tried to sit up. He actually managed to sit up. He couldn't help but be surprised. "I clearly remember that my spine was broken. How can I sit up now? Why does it seem like the injured part is only in intense pain?" Rue Butong and Tan Tan set up tents and moved everyone inside to have a good rest. When night came, Chu Yang and Gu Duxing's recovery had already stopped. They knew that the effect of the heavy pill was probably over. Their injuries were too serious. 1 pill was not enough for them to fully recover. So they took out 2 more pills and gave them to the 2. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang finally recovered a little. "I have an epiphany." Dong Wushang leaned on GMO. His voice was still weak as he said, "Everyone listen carefully." Chu Yang and the others suddenly felt awestruck. They knew that this was a sudden epiphany of a Saber King when he was facing a life-and-death crisis. This kind of epiphany was the most precious. Sometimes, this epiphany could even make a Saber King advance. This kind of epiphany was extremely precious to everyone. It had always been a secret. However, Dong Wuxiang obviously wanted to share it now. The domain of an emperor-level expert is indeed extraordinary. The might of the domain of 3 emperor-level experts isn't as simple as multiplying. I knew that I would die a moment ago. Therefore, I chose to sacrifice myself to let the 2 of them go out. Dong Wuxiang's words seemed to be boasting. But his brothers knew that he wasn't boasting. When I desperately burned my soul power to attack, I discovered that Kadi and second brother had also chosen the same method. But my black saber was heavy. So I took a step ahead. The 3 of us knew that we would die. So we wanted to let our brothers go out. Therefore, the situation of certain death suddenly changed at that moment. Dong Wuxiang smiled weakly. But his face shone with a profound radiance. The domain that could have killed us was still the domain at that moment. But the attack had deviated from its original direction. It had forced them to change their sword moves and change their direction. Therefore, second brother had kicked Luo Kadi out. And second brother had also gone out when I had bumped into him. But the 2 opponents had changed the direction of their swords because of this collision. Therefore, the 2 swords that should have pierced through my front and back didn't fall into a fatal position. All 3 of us should have died. But none of us died. Because we didn't have ourselves in our hearts at that moment. And we did something that we couldn't do because we didn't have ourselves. Therefore we didn't die. Selflessness is my epiphany. Dong Wuxiang sighed softly. There was a trace of reminiscence and emotion in his eyes. It seemed that he had recalled the last moment of his life and death. He had seen his 4 brothers rushing over with all their might. Then he smiled warmly. True feelings can only be seen at the moment of life and death. Epiphany can only be found at the moment of life and death. But there is no epiphany if one can't throw away life and death. So I don't have brothers. My saber technique has changed its name from now on. It's called Life Force in the Land of Death. Saber without injury. Dong Wuxiang's eyes shone brightly as he said, "It's easier to find life force in the land of death. That's because life force is too ordinary at other times. So we don't pay attention to it. Life force in the land of death is when extreme misfortune comes to happiness. Where there's life, there's death. All life comes from death. Therefore it's endless. And it's full of surprises and emotions." Dong Wuxiang was silent for a while. Then he said, "Actually, you'll realize that you're not giving when you're wholeheartedly giving your all for your brothers. Instead you're reaping. And you're reaping even more." Dong Wuxiang's eyes shone brightly as he said, "I felt this the most. You're not giving when you're wholeheartedly giving your all for your brothers. Instead you're reaping even more." All the brothers repeated this sentence in unison. There was a thoughtful look on their faces. Dong Wuxiang sighed in satisfaction. He slowly closed his eyes and said, "Big brother, I don't need to suppress my strength anymore. This epiphany has changed my state of mind a lot. I'm afraid that I'll break through to Saber Emperor after this." Break through to Saber Emperor. Dong Wuxiang had actually broken through so much at the brink of death. Chuyang, GMO, and the others were deep in thought. They remained silent and didn't speak. They were all deeply moved by Dong Wuxiang's words about giving and reaping. Gu Duxing's eyes suddenly lit up. They emitted a dazzling light. It seemed as if he had suddenly realized something. He suddenly laughed loudly. His voice was full of joy as he said, "I see." He and Dong Wuxiang had the same experience. So he immediately understood Dong Wuxiang's point. Luo Kadi was deep in thought. He seemed to have understood something. It was as if a thin barrier had appeared in front of him. It was almost translucent. He only needed to poke it with his hand and it would be broken. However, he couldn't touch it no matter what. He couldn't help but sink into deep thought for a long time. GMO thought about it carefully and tried to comprehend it carefully. However, he did not fully understand it. It seemed as if he had reached the edge. But he still couldn't touch the essence. Rui Butong muttered. His eyes were lifeless as he looked ahead. He was trying his best to think about the meaning behind these words. Tan Tan's eyes were lifeless. It seemed as if he hadn't heard anything. However, one would discover that a bright light would occasionally flash in the depths of Tan Tan's eyes if one looked carefully. It was as if there was a candlelight flickering in the wind on a vast prairie in the middle of a pitch-black night. This flame would certainly have the power to set the prairie ablaze if it could burn. As he pondered, the strange mark on his forehead seemed to be faintly flickering. Slowly it seemed to be growing a little bigger. Tan Tan suddenly held his head. A burst of severe headache had attacked him at lightning speed at this moment. This headache had come so suddenly that he hadn't been prepared for it. So Tan Tan couldn't help but groan in pain. His eyebrows were tightly wrinkled. Chuyang was startled. He asked, Tan Tan, what's wrong with you? Tan Tan didn't answer. He took a deep breath and clenched his teeth. Chuyang and the others suddenly felt as if a wild and tyrannical aura from ancient times was being fiercely emitted from Tan Tan's body. It seemed as if an ancient king had suddenly reappeared in the world at this moment. He was the ruler of the world. The brothers were horrified, but this aura then suddenly disappeared. Several fragmented scenes suddenly appeared in Tan Tan's mind. It seemed like a long time ago, or perhaps it was in another world, he had a group of brothers like this. A long-lost warmth suddenly surged into his heart. However, this feeling made him feel even more pain. At the same time, a strong sourness suddenly rushed up in his heart. His heart had never known sorrow. But it suddenly became extremely sad. It seemed as if his heart was being gripped in pain. It seemed as if the sky had suddenly collapsed and the earth had sunk. Too many people were standing in front of him. They were shouting at him, King, quickly leave. Then they collectively rushed towards that tragic scene of the sky collapsing and the earth sinking. They were fighting for that last breath of time for him to struggle. They were so resolute that they didn't look back. Blood gushed out of the wound. Tan Tan groaned in extreme pain. Chapter 567. Brother? Tan Tan held his head and suddenly murmured these two words. His voice was trembling when he said these two words. But it didn't have his unique voice at all. Instead, it was full of emotions, full of reluctance and full of emotions, extremely sad. It seemed as if these two words had come from his heart. They had turned into a moan-like call. This call seemed to have crossed thousands of years, crossed the endless vicissitudes of life, and used his life to call out these two words. Brother? Brother? Tan Tan called out again in a low voice. Suddenly, a crazy explosion occurred in his mind, and his mind became blank in an instant. He wanted to say, I'm ashamed to be your king. Have you blamed me for all these years? But he didn't get to say it. Those anxious faces disappeared in an instant. It seemed as if the clouds in the sky had vanished in an instant. Then Tan Tan screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood. His vision turned black and he suddenly lost consciousness. 7 days after that battle. It was late at night. Everything was quiet. The insects were chirping and the cicadas were singing. It was so quiet that it made people feel like they were in a dreamlike place of silence. It seemed as if their impetuous hearts had also calmed down, and they had become happy. In the dense night, a long stretch of vitality suddenly burst out, and slowly pervaded the air. Then the aura of a breakthrough suddenly erupted along with this vitality. Then Chuyang walked out of the tent. He held his hands behind his back and strolled under the starry sky. Chuyang had advanced 4 grades in a row tonight, and had broken through to Sword King grade in one fell swoop. There was still room for further advancement in this period of time. But Chuyang stopped. It would be unwise to advance his cultivation to Emperor level before he found the 4th fragment of the Tribulation Sword. It would be more difficult if he used his already consolidated cultivation to complement the Tribulation Sword. And he would lose even more. Chuyang's mind was somewhat chaotic. Tan Tan had been sitting silently in the tent since he had fainted that day. And he had been like a puppet for several days. He hadn't spoken a word. It was impossible to guess what had happened to him. But Chuyang was very worried. Strange things had happened to Tan Tan's body one after another during this period of time. First, he had suddenly eaten the inner core of a spirit beast. Then he had gotten a high fever. Then he had stopped eating and started to eat the inner core instead. And now such a thing had happened. What was going on? Chuyang paced back and forth with his hands clasped behind his back. He was constantly pondering in his heart, how can Tan Tan's situation be brought about? Not long after, an aura of a breakthrough erupted, and a vast saber chi shot up into the sky, shattering the clouds. The Saber Emperor realm, dispelling the clouds and revealing the blue sky. Then Dong Wuxiang also walked out quietly. Boss. Dong Wuxiang's figure became more and more burly. His rough and majestic body had already turned into a somewhat elegant and heavy one. Although there were still traces of his movements, he was already at ease. He was faintly showing the embryonic form of a peerless expert. Anyone who saw Dong Wuxiang would immediately and inexplicably think of a scene. One man and one saber against the heroes of the world. That kind of peerlessly crazy and heroic scene that made one's blood boil completely. It was as heavy as a mountain, as vast as the sea. Saber Emperor. Saber Emperor. 10,000 sabers would bow down in front of him. The first pure Saber Emperor of the 3 heavens in 300 years. The first saber emperor of the three heavens under the age of 20 in 1,000 years, who was only 10 years old. Have you made a breakthrough? Chuyang didn't turn his head. His footsteps didn't stop either. He slowly walked forward and softly asked. Yes. Dong Wuxiang nodded. Then he trod on the dark green grass beside Chuyang, and silently walked forward. He took a deep breath and said, Before I met boss, my goal was to break through to the king level as soon as possible. At that time, I could only use the black saber cultivation technique of my clan to practice and fight. After I met boss, I changed. Boss asked second brother to give me countless saber insights. So, a saber path of cultivation appeared in front of me. Therefore my journey has been very smooth. However, tonight's breakthrough is the happiest for me. Dong Wuxiang gently smiled. He shook his head and said, Because this kind of breakthrough only belongs to me. Even if someone else had this kind of insight before, I figured it out myself this time. Therefore I'm very happy. Dong Wuxiang's eyes emitted a sharp light. This is my saber. The saber without injury. First grade saber emperor. Not bad. Chuyang praised. The saber without injury. What is the saber without injury? The saber without injury. Dong Wuxiang proudly said, Only death. The saber without injury. Chuyang gently smiled but didn't say anything. The saber without injury naturally wasn't for death. The cultivation of saber path wasn't entirely for slaughter. Dong Wuxiang knew this but he didn't understand it. Only when he reached a new realm would he be able to comprehend it himself. At that time, Dong Wuxiang's saber without injury would be considered a small achievement, right? However, Chuyang obviously wouldn't say it now. He wanted Dong Wuxiang to comprehend it himself. He wanted to comprehend the true saber without injury. Du Xing is also about to break through. Chuyang took a deep breath and said, Us brothers can be considered to have some ability to protect ourselves in these 3 days. This ability is all because of you, big brother. Dong Wuxiang stopped in his tracks and looked at Chuyang's back. His eyes were full of undisguised feelings and admiration. What I hope to bring to you more is an infinitely brilliant future. Chuyang lightly said, also, confidence and self-improvement. Even if there's no more Chuyang in this world one day, you can still rise to the top. That's what I hope for. Without you, Chuyang? Big brother, what do you mean? Dong Wuxiang's expression turned cold. He narrowed his eyes and the light in his eyes suddenly condensed. A faint dangerous aura came out of his body. Saber energy filled the sky. Just a saying. There's no need to be so nervous. Chuyang chuckled and said, Actually, I should say it like this. If there's no more brothers in this world, even if there's only one left, we'll still dominate the world. At the peak, we'll write the legend of today. For some reason, after this breakthrough, Chuyang suddenly had a strange feeling. It was as if the front had turned into a cloud of fog again. He couldn't see clearly and couldn't speak clearly. Dong Wuxiang raised his eyebrows. They were like two peerless treasured sabers that suddenly jumped out of the sky. He lightly said, If Big Brother is in trouble, then why should I, Dong Wuxiang, cherish my life? This sentence was said lightly, but it was filled with a strong sense of brotherly affection that seemed to have spread across the vast grassland. The two of them stopped at the same time and looked up at the sky. The stars twinkled in the sky. Chuyang felt something in his heart. He couldn't help but sigh softly and said, I wonder what kind of world there is above this starry sky? A voice softly said, If Big Brother's ambition is in the starry sky, us brothers will charge up there. What do you think? This was a cold reputation, but there was too much uncontrollable excitement. That was the endless excitement of finally getting one's long-cherished wish. The two of them turned back at the same time. Under the starry sky, Gu Duxing's black robe fluttered as he walked over. His figure was like a faintly discernible divine sword. Although he was lonely and aloof at this moment, there was a kind of emperor's aura that came out of nowhere. It was as if in front of him all the swords in the world had to bow down. First grade sword sovereign. Charge up to sword sovereign, bring Sister Xiaomiao out and marry Sister Xiaomiao. This was Gu Duxing's lifelong dream. Even Chuyang didn't expect that Gu Duxing would reach such a cultivation level at such a young age. Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing's eyes met. Instantly, an invisible electric light flashed. It was as if a peerless treasured saber had suddenly met a peerless sharp sword. At this moment, brilliant sparks were created from the collision. Second brother, congratulations. The first sword sovereign in 300 years of three heavens. Dong Wuxiang's eyes exploded with endless battle enthusiasm. How about fighting with me? Gu Duxing laughed. His cold and sharp eyes shot over and stared at Dong Wuxiang's face. Dong Wuxiang instantly felt as if his face was pricked by a sharp needle. It was painful. After a long time, Gu Duxing's eyes gradually became as cold as ice and snow. He said indifferently, "A battle is also good." As he said this, the sword energy of the wasteland suddenly soared to the sky. Dong Wuxiang let out a deep and muffled roar. His figure took a step back. With the saber in his hand, the saber energy filled the sky. One sword energy and one saber light collided in the dense air. The invisible momentum collided with a biting cold murderous aura. Bang, bang, bang. It seemed as if this silent night had been completely cut into pieces. Chu Yang clasped his hands behind his back and looked at his two brothers. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This saber sovereign and sword sovereign are indeed different from ordinary martial emperors. Too different. If an ordinary first-grade martial emperor were to fight against a saber sovereign, the victor would be decided in one move. Dong Wuxiang's saber sovereign was also different from the saber sovereigns of the Yi clan in Chu Yang's memory. Although those people's grades were higher than Dong Wuxiang's, the purity of their saber path was far inferior. That was because those people advanced together at the beginning. Only when they reached a certain level did they start to focus on saber. But Dong Wuxiang only had saber in his heart since childhood. He didn't have anything else besides saber. Therefore, ever since he was young, all of his efforts, all of his wisdom, and all of his plans had been focused on this saber. Therefore, Dong Wuxiang's saber sovereign was a very pure saber sovereign. Gu Duxing was also the same. Chu Yang still remembered Gu Duxing's extreme fanaticism when he had first arrived at the Heavenly Armament Pavilion and saw his sword. And this fanaticism could also be clearly seen on Dong Wuxiang's body. While Chu Yang was thinking, the two people on the battlefield had already brandished their sabers and swords. Suddenly, the shadows of their sabers and swords filled the night sky. It was unknown when Luo Kudi and GMO had come out. They were somewhat enviously looking at Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing. Chapter 568. Luo Kudi and GMO had also made breakthroughs. Moreover, for the two of them this was definitely a huge breakthrough. They had broken through to king level. This achievement was enough to show disdain for the whole world. However, it had suddenly become only king level because of Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing. They would be considered rare geniuses in the upper three heavens if they had such cultivation at their age. However, both of them were only depressed at this moment. Rui Butong drooped his head as if he had lost his parents. He had broken through the least among his brothers. He was now an 8th grade king level expert. This had made Rui Butong so depressed that he almost went crazy. He had been a 7th grade king level expert a few days ago, and they had only been 5th grade king level experts. So he had flaunted his prowess. However, he hadn't expected that such good days would last for less than a month. And he had once again become the bottom. How could Rui Butong endure this? Tan Tan staggered out and sat cross-legged beside Chu Yang. He was unconsciously chewing a grass root in his mouth. His eyes were somewhat perplexed and scattered. It seemed as if he didn't care about the fierce battle in front of him. "Are you okay? How was it? What happened that day?" Chu Yang asked. Tan Tan looked at the void in a daze. It seemed as if he hadn't heard Chu Yang's words. "A long time passed, senior brother?" Tan Tan lowered his head and said in a low and hoarse voice. "What's wrong, Tan Tan?" Chu Yang was somewhat surprised. His heart tightened. He hadn't seen Tan Tan so listless even during the most difficult times. Moreover, Tan Tan rarely called him senior brother. He had always called him by his name. However, it proved that the matter was very serious if he had called him senior brother. And Tan Tan was very serious about it. A loud clang was heard in the field. The black saber and the black dragon sword had fiercely clashed. The sword light was like a long dragon as it soared high into the sky. The saber light was like the Milky Way as it floated in the clear sky for thousands of miles. The two men separated as soon as they came into contact. Then the saber light and sword shadow gradually turned into a white light and a black energy and entangled together. It was obvious that the Sword Emperor and the Saber Emperor had fought to their heart's content after their breakthroughs. Moreover, both of them had gradually grasped the mysteries of the Emperor-level realm. Currently, it was being further verified and consolidated. Tan Tan's complexion became increasingly gloomy under the illumination of the sword and saber's radiance. "What's going on?" Chu Yang's face slowly became serious. "Senior Martial Brother, have you ever felt that I was somewhat abnormal since I was a child?" Tan Tan laughed in a self-deprecating manner. His voice was so low that it made Chu Yang feel somewhat distressed. But I woke up and discovered that this wasn't a dream, because I wasn't asleep. I was meditating. Tan Tan's expression became even more strange. It seemed as if he had seen a ghost. I always knew that you were good to me. But I found out from the dream that you had been coaxing me since I was 2 years old. You always let me do whatever I wanted. Chu Yang's senior martial brother. Tan Tan's eyes were somewhat red. I will remember your kindness to me for the rest of my life. Chu Yang opened his mouth. But he didn't know what to say. He could only take a deep breath. Then he exhaled deeply. He felt that his mood was violently churning. Yes, I care about Tan Tan very much. I care about Master very much. It's like this in my previous life. It's because of Tan Tan's accidental death and Meng Chao Ran's disappearance in my previous life that I had resolutely embarked on the ruthless sword's path of revenge. I've looked like this since I was a child. I'm very different from you. I also know that I'm very ugly. Tan Tan chuckled. I know that I'm not good looking. At least, I'm not good looking in the eyes of normal people like you. But, I've been thinking that I'm handsome for so many years. And it's not because I'm fooling around. It's because I really think that I'm very handsome. In fact, this kind of handsomeness carries a strong self-confidence. Moreover, no one has ever been able to attack my self-confidence. Tan Tan mischievously laughed in a strange manner. I still think that I'm very handsome even if they curse me viciously. This isn't blindness. And it's absolutely not an illness. Tan Tan earnestly said, it's because I truly believe that there's no second person in this world who's more handsome than me. Tan Tan's expression was very serious. His voice was very serious. He was absolutely not joking. Chu Yang gradually became serious. Therefore, I feel that I'm different from the people of this world. Tan Tan finally said with difficulty, I've been having this feeling recently, that I don't belong to this world. This isn't my world. I'm 100 times more confident that I'm handsome. But that's because I've never looked at myself with the eyes of this world. It seems that there's something restless and awakening inside my body of late. Tan Tan sighed in melancholy. I don't know what it is, but I can feel that it's very dangerous. If this world is not my world, then where is my world? Tan Tan turned his head and looked at Chu Yang with his clear black and white eyes. His voice contained a sense of loss, sadness, and fear. He was afraid of the unknown. Chu Yang firmly looked at Tan Tan. And his heart suddenly shook at this moment. That was because he had clearly discovered that there seemed to be something else in Tan Tan's pupils. It seemed as if it was another world. Moreover, a radiant sun, a crescent moon and specks of starlight had suddenly appeared in this vast and desolate world. Bang! Another earth-shaking sound was heard from afar. The battle between the Saber Emperor and the Sword Emperor had reached its climax. However, these two martial brothers were facing each other in silence on this side. Don't let your imagination run wild. Chu Yang patted Tan Tan's shoulder and comforted him. You're Tan Tan. You're my junior martial brother, my brother. You and I both have drifting lives. You've always regarded me as your elder brother, and I've always regarded you as my flesh and blood compatriot. Tan Tan, you must pull yourself together. But I can feel that it's real. It's real. Tan Tan somewhat helplessly looked at Chu Yang. Can you feel it? I can eat the inner cores of spirit beasts without exploding. I have a high fever that can even melt stones. But nothing has happened to me. I can't eat anything now. I can only eat the inner cores of spirit beast. Tan Tan sorrowfully looked at Chu Yang. Senior martial brother, Chu Yang? Can I still be considered a human? Tan Tan's eyes flickered with an extremely destructive radiance. Can I still be considered a human? Chu Yang was speechless for a moment. Indeed, Tan Tan couldn't be considered a human in any aspect apart from his human body. But what could Chu Yang say? Don't think too much. Chu Yang turned Tan Tan's face around and made him look straight at him. Then he earnestly said, Tan Tan, think about me, think about your master. What would happen to us if something were to happen to you? How sad would your master be? Go and do your thing. Practice your martial arts. Don't forget that your master and master's wife have been separated for many years. So we must fulfill our master's wish. I want to rush to the heavens. You're my brother. So, it's your responsibility to help me fulfill my wish. Chu Yang eagerly said, Tan Tan, you must help us. You mustn't do anything stupid. Chu Yang's heart ached as he saw the despair in Tan Tan's eyes. So, he had no choice but to put the blame on him in order to appease him. You would slowly think of a way later. Tan Tan looked at him in a daze for a long time. Then he nodded and said, Chuyang, I feel that I'm in danger. I'm afraid that I'll hurt you at some point. I'll leave on my own if I'm still conscious at that time. So, don't look for me. He paused and said, You, kill me if I'm no longer conscious. He looked into Chu Yang's eyes. Then he suddenly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times in a row. Then he straightened up, Senior Marshal Brother, I beg you. Promise me. If that day really comes, then kill me. Kill me. Chu Yang's entire body shook. He was dumbstruck. Chapter 569. Ha ha ha. Chu Yang forced himself to laugh twice. He wanted to force himself to sober up and calm down. However, his voice sounded as if a piece of red-hot charcoal had been stuffed in his throat. He could tell that Tan Tan wasn't joking. If there is a time when I am sober, I will leave on my own. Don't look for me. If there is a time when I am not sober, then tell me, kill me. If there is a time when that day comes, I beg you, kill me. Then there was the sound of Tan Tan kowtowing. Chu Yang seemed to have lost consciousness for a moment. His mind was in a trance as these words and the sound of Tan Tan kowtowing echoed in his mind. He was dazed for a while. Then he sat down on the ground. I can kill people. I can kill everyone in the world. But how could I lay my hands on my brothers, my family? Kill you? Ha ha. Chu Yang felt as if he was floating in the air. It was a kind of powerlessness that he had no one to rely on. He said faintly, Tan Tan, if you were me and I were you, would you kill me if we switched positions? Tan Tan was startled. How can I kill you? The same principle. How can I kill you? Chu Yang stretched out his hand and hugged his younger martial brother. He sighed and said, You are my brother. How can I kill you? Do you know how cruel your request is to me? Tan Tan was disappointed and frustrated for a long time. He said, But I will really hurt you. I have a feeling about this. Sometimes when I see you, a strong impulse to kill you rises in my heart. I try to suppress it with all my might. But I can't suppress it. Stop. Don't say any more. Chu Yang calmly and resolutely said, There will never be such a day. He said in his heart, If there is a time when that day comes, I would rather be injured than you. I am your elder brother. Only I can bear it if I have to bear it. But nothing must happen to you. Tan Tan listened to Chu Yang's resolute and decisive words, and couldn't help but feel a little relieved in his heart. However, he was still somewhat startled. He wanted to say something. He wanted to talk about the matter of those 3 people who had suddenly appeared that day, and had addressed him as king. But his mind suddenly began to ache again. Those fragmented images unceasingly emerged in his mind, and he couldn't help but frown. Well, everything will pass, it's just like a nightmare. Just wake up. Chu Yang's mind was in a mess. So, he didn't notice Tan Tan's expression. He patted Tan Tan's shoulder and comforted him, You should eat well and sleep well for the next few days. Don't think about anything, don't do anything. Don't practice martial arts either. That way, I won't go astray when I'm being invaded by this kind of inner demon. Tan Tan replied with an sound. He lowered his head and didn't say anything. He was trying his best to resist the severe pain in his head. He lowered his head because he didn't want his senior martial brother to see his painful appearance. He was afraid that Chu Yang would be worried about him. Chu Yang sighed and stood up. He looked at the starry sky and asked, Master, what would you do if you encountered such a thing? He couldn't help but sigh again as he thought about it. Meng Chaoran was an indifferent person. He wouldn't care about his own life or death if he encountered such a thing. He would just do whatever he wanted. Even if such a thing happened one day, he would just close his eyes and everything would be over. This was Meng Chaoran's character. He was indifferent to the extent of passivity. However, Chu Yang was different. Chu Yang was carefree and stubborn. Since he knew about it in advance, he would do everything he could to make up for it and stop it. Even if it happened, he would only think about how to salvage it. He wouldn't do nothing. The battle between the Saber Emperor and the Sword Emperor had come to an end. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang deliberately used some moves that were mixed with the comprehension of the Great Tao in order to let the brothers who were watching the battle better understand their current state of mind. They used the surging energy and the dense Great Tao realm to let Luo Kadi GMO, and the others use as a reference to make a breakthrough. Finally, a loud bang was heard. A dazzling ball of light suddenly burst out. Then it suddenly dispersed. Gu Duxing's black robe fluttered in the wind. His long sword was still in its scabbard. Dong Wushang had his black saber on his back. He was standing evenly. His two long legs seemed to be supporting his entire body into the starry sky. Both of them were sweating profusely. However, their eyes were full of joy. They were smiling at each other. Both of them had thoroughly stabilized their cultivation of first-grade emperor level after this battle. After all, which saber emperor would have a sword emperor who had just broken through to the first-grade emperor level when he had just broken through? Similarly, which sword emperor would have a saber emperor who had just broken through to the first-grade emperor level when he had just broken through to the first-grade emperor level? This was simply a night of miracles. GMO Luo Kudi and Miao Butong were no longer unconvinced. They had also benefited a lot from watching this battle. They had already closed their eyes and sat down. They were wholeheartedly comprehending what they had just comprehended. Your saber is very strange. And your sword is very strange. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang regulated their breathing. They opened their mouths at the same time and said the same thing. Then they laughed at the same time. You first, Gu Duxing said. Well, I can feel that your sword is full of loneliness. That is the pride and aloofness of a swordsman. It is also the pride of a sword. I understand this point. But what I can't understand the most is, why is it full of enthusiasm at the same time? Dong Wushang had some doubts. I wouldn't have been in such a difficult situation if it was only the pride and aloofness of the sword. But, the level of the sword has been raised by another level after this other kind of enthusiasm has been added. What's going on? The sword is ruthless. It is also proud. Since ancient times, the sword has been the weapon of war. The ruler is warm and courteous. But, he will always keep people at a distance of 1,000 miles. He is reclusive and unsociable. Gu Duxing slowly said, but I am a person. I'm not a sword. So I have feelings. I have brothers. I have lovers. So I am sentimental. I separate the sword from the person. The sword is the sword and I am me. I use the person to control the sword. So this unique sword technique was created. Speaking of this, he couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Because when he broke through, he was still thinking about Gu Miaoling's deep love and brotherly affection. He broke through to the emperor level with this deep love. Moreover, Chuyang had always instilled in him the idea that the person controls the sword, not the sword controls the person. So, after breaking through to the sword emperor level, he achieved the unique and aloofness of enthusiasm. This sword technique had never been seen before. Sword conception. Gu Duxing said heavily, I call this sword technique the sentimental swordsman emotionless sword. Sentimental swordsman emotionless sword? Dong Wushang muttered to himself. He seemed to have understood something. Your saber is also very different. It carries a strong aura of death after it is unsheathed, and a violent and domineering aura that wants to destroy the world. This should be the result of your saber and your body fusing into one. The saber and your aura fusing into one. However, this aura of death has a trace of vitality that is being controlled. It is this vitality that makes your saber seem alive. This feeling is very strange. Gu Duxing muttered to himself and said his opinion of Dong Wushang. This is a saber without injury. When the saber is unsheathed, there is no injury, only death. Dong Wushang repeated what he had said to Chuyang. Finally he said, however, I can feel that this is not the highest realm that I can reach. There are many more beyond this realm. His eyes flashed as he repeated, many more. The night was silent. Chuyang looked up at the sky, lost in thought. Tan Tan lowered his head and sat motionless on the ground. GMO Luo Kudi and Miao Butong sat for a while to comprehend. Then they stood up and fought with each other. Then they sat down again to comprehend, and so on. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang stood on the left and right sides of their brothers to protect them. Ao Xie Yun crazily shuttled back and forth in the mountain forest. He was desperate. He jumped down from the top of the mountain. He stepped on a few vines and grabbed them. Then he reached the opposite side of the cliff. Then he rolled down a gentle slope with his clothes on. Then he jumped into the water. He had already pinched a reed in his hand before he had entered the water. He blew on the reed and the reed became unobstructed. He held it in his mouth and floated downstream with the current. He had never thought that the opposite party would still pursue him closely after he had turned north. Moreover, the momentum of their pursuit was getting bigger and bigger. However, he also understood that the opposite party was already riding a tiger. They would not stop until he was dead. Their plan would be ruined if the Ao clan reacted. He could only escape. He could only escape and stay alive to uncover this conspiracy. He could get back the price for the people who had died. He would be wronged forever if he died. Moreover, his corpse would become a tool for these people who were chasing after him. There were no more tears in his eyes. When Du Qingyun finally pushed him out of the encirclement, Ao Xieyun didn't have any more tears left. Qinzhan had died in battle a month and a half ago. Qinzhan had only said a few words when Ao Xieyun and Du Qingyun had risked their lives to escape with Qinzhan. "Young lord, you must survive." Then he had struggled down from Du Qingyun's back, and had rushed towards the enemy. He had only blocked the enemy for less than a blink of an eye in the end. However, that old man had given everything he had. Du Qingyun had then taken him to escape. Du Qingyun had imparted his experience of escaping to him whenever he had free time within a month. In particular, he had imparted his experience of escaping to Ao Xieyun. He had imparted to Ao Xie what he needed to pay attention to, how to make sure that the enemy couldn't find him, how to make use of the grass and trees around him. Du Qingyun had a premonition that Ao Xieyun wouldn't live for long at that time. So, he had imparted all of his life's experience to Ao Xieyun. Then Ao Xieyun had made the decision to take him and escape. He had used his own life as a tool for Ao Xieyun to experiment with these experiences. In the end, this venerable old man had pushed Ao Xieyun with a loud laugh when he had died. He had exhausted all of his martial power to push Ao Xieyun out. Then he had thrown Ao Xieyun out. Then he had rushed towards the swarm of enemies while laughing heroically. His last words had resounded in the night sky. "Haha, I'm relieved. Please recommend me. I'm a bit sad. I said that I would break out at 8,000 points yesterday. However, I haven't reached 8,000 yet. Brothers and sisters, do your best." Chapter 570. The rims of Ao Xieyun's eyes turned red as he thought of this. The people who had been protecting him had died one after another. Now he was the only one left. He had thoroughly lost everything he could rely on. His clan was too far away. He was only one person at the moment. He was only Ao Xieyun. He wasn't the Grand Duke of Ao clan. He wasn't the #1 expert of the younger generation. He wasn't that distinguished and elegant Grand Duke Xie either. He was only a person who was being chased and fleeing. There were thousands of people behind him. Thousands of experts were chasing him and intercepting him. They wanted to kill him. Ao Xieyun had unearthed all his potential in this extremely bad situation. Du Qingyun had sacrificed himself heroically for 15 days. Ao Xieyun had wanted to cry countless times in these short 15 days. But he knew that he couldn't cry. The smell of his tears couldn't be concealed from Du Xiao, who was from the Poison Spirit clan. He could only abandon everything, including grief and anger, and escape with all his strength. He had to use all his wisdom to carve out his own path of survival. These 15 days had felt like 15 years to him. In fact, it had felt even longer than 15 years. He had self-taught himself how to run with all his strength. He had also learned how to hide his body odor and sweat. He had also learned how to use a small blade of grass to cover his entire body. He had also learned how to use the special features of mountains and rivers. He had also learned how to use the refraction of sunlight to create the illusion of his own invisibility. So, he had escaped from the encirclement. These were all things that he would never have dreamed of before. He now knew that Ao clan was the #1 clan. But it still couldn't scare people. Ao clan was nothing special. And he was nothing special either. Ao clan had been destroyed. And it had also been reduced to rubble. So, he would have also become a stinky piece of land if he had died. He would have been no different from a beggar who had to kneel at the feet of others every day. Everyone was equal in front of the urn. This sentence had suddenly come to realization when he had written it here. Ao Xieyun had been besieged and chased more than 100 times in these 15 days. He had thought that he would die dozens of times. But he had managed to escape by the skin of his teeth every time. He had finally felt a sense of safety in the depths of his heart as he felt the warm and cool river water wrapping around his battered body. However, this sense of safety couldn't withstand a single blow. At this moment he finally had time to think about some things. Ao Xieyun recalled the deaths of Du Qingyun and Qinzhan in the end, and grief welled up in his heart. Du Qingyun and Qinzhan shouldn't have died so early. But they still chose to die. Why? Du Qingyun and Qinzhan knew that they were going to die this time when the enemy was still pursuing them on a large scale. Therefore, they wanted to promote Ao Xieyun's growth one last time before they died. After all, the escape of 3 people was not as small a target as a single person. Everything would be fine as long as Ao Xieyun could escape. However, with the 2 of them by his side, even if Ao Xieyun didn't want to rely on them at all, they were still an invisible form of support. He can't unleash his potential. That way, when the enemy really chased them to the end of the line, everything would be over. Therefore, Du Qingyun and Qin Zhan began to sharpen Aoxie Yun through actual combat and autonomous escape. As long as Aoxie Yun could comprehend it and grasp its true essence, his chances of escaping alone would be 10 times greater than the three of them together. Therefore, Du Qingyun had chosen to die when there was no need to sacrifice himself. Only leave the young lord behind. We're disloyal if we abandon you when there's hope. But we're even more responsible if we abandon you to die when there's no hope. We'll use our hot blood to burn your soul. We'll use our life and death to unleash your potential. These were words that the two old men hadn't said and wouldn't have said. But Aoxie Yun had heard them from his own heart. Tears silently slid down and melted into the water. Aoxie Yun dared to shed tears only on such a night and in such an environment. Even shedding tears had become a luxury in this kind of escape. The river water was gushing. Aoxie Yun was trying his best to relax his body. He was trying his best to heal his injuries and to recover every bit of his physical strength. Suddenly, a sense of danger arose in his heart. Aoxie Yun immediately held his breath, and his body silently slid down the river. His toes stiffened, and he seemed to have touched a big rock at the bottom of the river. Aoxie Yun's heart skipped a beat, and he silently floated over. He stretched out his hand and there was indeed a big rock in the water. Moreover, there was a small empty space below it. The river water had formed a whirlpool there, and it continued to flow downwards. Aoxie Yun carefully controlled himself. He made full use of the impact of the water flow to squeeze his body under the big rock with great difficulty. He carefully extended his reed pipe out of the water, and stopped moving. As the river water continued to flow downwards, he would reach the shallow water sooner or later. If he was discovered, he would die without a doubt. Moreover, the sun was about to rise. Once the day came, he would be a live target in the river water. He had just hidden himself when suddenly, there were a few whooshing sounds and a few people landed on the shore. Following that, the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind could be heard. There were at least a few dozen people here. Did you discover anything? A low voice asked. This voice had passed through the water and had reached Aoxie Yun's ears. It sounded quite strange. But Aoxie Yun still recognized whose voice it was. Black Devil. It was the voice of the young Black Devil. Sure enough, you are here. Aoxie Yun secretly clenched his teeth under the big rock. However, he didn't dare to move. In fact, he even controlled his heartbeat and pulse to slow down. Now, these life and death enemies were right above his head. He would have no way out if he was discovered. I didn't discover anything, another person replied. His voice was full of suspicion. Aoxie Yun could imagine this person's frowning and bewildered appearance even though they were separated by the river water. Wuxia. Aoxie Yun's heart was spasming under the water. He roared. This was his former friend and companion? Didn't you say that it was foolproof? How long has it been? Another voice snorted. Meng Luo. This matter is indeed very strange. I used to sprinkle some 1,000-day scars on Aoxie Yun's body every once in a while when we were together. It wasn't as exaggerated as 1,000 days, but that smell wouldn't disappear for a year. And that smell couldn't be smelled by other people. We used this smell to kill all of their people during this time. So, how did Aoxie Yun suddenly lose this smell? Du Xiao suspiciously said. Aoxie Yun couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood underwater. Everything is because of me. Du Xiao has been preparing to deal with me since a long time ago. He has been scheming for a long time. It's no wonder that he has always been able to coincidentally bump into me at any place. Then we would do some things together. I had always thought that I was destined to meet him. Moreover, Du Xiao had been very sincere at that time. He had always followed my lead. He had always been considerate of me. Therefore, I would always call him whenever something good happened. For example, that gambling on MT Dingjun? I lost that gambling. But I had done it out of kindness. So, there's no doubt about it. Who would have thought that all of this would lead to a merciless pursuit? And all of these coincidences and all of these accurate pursuits. The root of all of this lies in Du Xiao's words. Sprinkle some 1,000-day scars on my body every once in a while. It's because of me. I've always harmed them. Aoxie Yun's remorseful heart was bleeding whenever he thought about how the pursuers would quickly catch up with him every time he tried to escape. Why didn't I think of this earlier? He then heard a voice from above. You're worthy of being called the poison spirit. Aoxie Yun is very lucky to have a friend like you in this generation. I presume that Brother O has also flattered Aoxie Yun a lot, right? Haha, Aosia Yun has always been conceited about his wisdom and strategy. But I didn't expect that Brother O would play with him in the palm of his hand for so many years. Brother O is indeed a genius. This voice was somewhat rampant. It was the voice of the two clans' young clan lord, Tu Qianhao. Odu Zhao's somewhat angry voice said, "Nonsense. Who wouldn't guard against each other at our level and status? Our entire clan might be destroyed if we make a careless move. Who would dare to act rashly? You only know that I secretly attacked Aosia Yun. Does Aosia Yun really regard me as a brother?" He angrily said, "How many people would dare to show their backs to the other person even if we are standing together now? Tu Qianhao, what do you mean by this?" Tu Qianhao snorted. He was about to speak when Meng Luo hurriedly interjected. "Brother O's actions are understandable. After all, everything is for the clan. Besides, it was Brother O's unintentional act back then that allowed us to hunt him down so smoothly this time. At the very least, you've made a great contribution." Tu Qianhao didn't speak anymore. Aosia Yun gently sighed at the bottom of the water. Then he laughed at himself. "Oh Du Xiao, I don't regard you as a real brother. But there was a time when I genuinely wanted to marry you. But Aosia Yun has disappeared now. Brother O understands this 1,000 days mark, the best. So, you might as well speculate under what circumstances this 1,000 days mark will disappear?" Oh Du Xiao said from above. He would have had to stay in the water for at least a day in order to get rid of the smell of the 1,000 days mark. That's because this smell has penetrated deep into his skin. And it has already fused with his own smell. There's another possibility. And he would have stayed in the water and let the clear water isolate the spread of the smell. Aosia Yun didn't have time to soak in the water for a day during our pursuit. According to the various traces, Aosia Yun should have fallen into the water after rolling down the hillside. There's a river here. And Aosia Yun should have been in the river. That's why I've lost my senses. Aosia Yun's heart fiercely jumped underwater. His face turned deathly pale. His lumbar spine felt uncomfortable and stiff after sitting for 7 or 8 hours. "I'll go out and find a massage therapist. I only need 30 votes to reach the top. Brothers and sisters, please lend me a hand. Thank you." Chapter 571. This river is so wide and so long. Do you want all of us to jump into it to look for him? It was Tu Qianhao's voice again. However, Aosia Yun almost wanted to jump out and kiss him when he heard this voice. "Of course, I won't let all of you jump into it to look for him." Oh Du Xiao said confidently, "It's just a river." Aosia Yun would have dived down with the current if he had jumped into it. He would have been able to escape our encirclement with the fastest speed. It hasn't even been half an hour since he jumped into the river. Therefore he can't have gone far. Let the people downstream use a fishing net to catch him. Pay attention at all times. He won't have anywhere to hide as long as daybreak arrives. Moreover, I'll use poison to chase him down for 50 kilometers in the water. Then I'll catch him. Oh Du Xiao smiled confidently. Aosia Yun won't be able to escape 50 kilometers under the water in his current state. 50 kilometers under the water? Everyone asked. Use, 1,000 souls perish and scatter. Oh Du Xiao said word by word. Everyone couldn't help but shiver when they heard this name. Then they drew back a few steps in succession. The 1,000 souls perish and scatter was one of the most vicious poisons of the O clan. Its might was so great that it could be compared with the strongest plague. Oh Du Xiao cautiously put on deerskin gloves. Then he circulated his qi. Then he suddenly jumped up and jumped into the river. His body was in midair. Then he sprinkled a gray fog from his hands, and it spread across the entire river. The gray fog drifted down. Meng Luo shook his hand, and the rope tied to Odu Zhao's waist suddenly tightened. Odu Zhao borrowed this pulling force and flew back. The gray fog had already touched the river's surface. An unbelievable scene appeared in front of everyone the next moment. The river water suddenly surged like a boiling pot. Countless big and small fishes fiercely struggled, and floated to the surface of the river. Then they turned over their white bellies and became motionless. The fishes on the river's surface continued to float up and down as the river water rushed down. The grass by the riverbank turned black and turned to ashes. This kind of poison spread all the way down, and the river was filled with floating corpses of fish, water snakes, water prawns, and other creatures. It was unknown how long the white flowers stretched. Even in the middle of the night, it was still eerie and terrifying. Everyone was speechless for a moment, frightened by the cruelty of this vicious woman. The 1,000 souls perishing dispersion was indeed worthy of its reputation. Regardless of whether it was an animal or a plant, it could poison them all. This is called 1,000 souls perishing dispersal. In the water and with this current, it can only maintain the poison for a distance of 100 li. After that, it will disappear. Odu Xiao insipidly said, if this poison were to be released in a densely populated inland area, and released at a high altitude, it would make both humans and animals within a radius of 1,000 miles to go extinct. Everyone's complexion changed. They had clearly imagined the scene of Odu Xiao using this poison in their own clans. Odu Xiao swept his eyes around, and a meaningful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He looked at Tu Qianhao and said, for example, Brother Tu's clan is surrounded by mountains. It's very suitable for this 1,000 souls perishing dispersion. Tu Qianhao's complexion changed. He took a step back and said in a dense manner, but my two clans' mountain forest has many corpses with evil intentions buried there. Odu Xiao burst into loud laughter. Everyone else looked at the floating corpses of fishes and prawns in the river, and felt a chill run down their spines. The O clan is indeed a dangerous clan. The river water rushed down and washed away the corpses of fishes and prawns. However, more and more corpses of fishes and prawns were piling up downstream. Ao Xieyun will undoubtedly die if he escapes from this river. Odu Xiao smiled with a cruel and ruthless look in his eyes. He thought in his heart, Ao Xieyun, how can I get rid of the guilt in my heart if you don't die? He and Ao Xieyun were on good terms. But he was far more eager to frame Ao Xieyun than anyone else. This was the reason. This was also the mentality of a traitor. Many people found it strange. They couldn't understand why a loyal subordinate would betray him so thoroughly. In fact, it was to the point of madness. Don't tell me that he doesn't care about our old friendship? It's because I've betrayed you. So, I'm even more irreconcilable than an ordinary mortal enemy. My heart won't be at ease if you don't die. It's because our old friendship is unforgettable that I've betrayed you even more thoroughly. This has nothing to do with the heart. But it has everything to do with the person. Therefore, the closest friend is the most dreadful enemy. These words weren't false at all. You'll always have the opportunity to twist and turn when your enemy tries to deal with you. But you'll be consigned to eternal damnation once your friend changes. Ao Xieyun was sweating all over even though he was at the bottom of the river. His position was parallel to Odu Xiao's on the shore. Odu Xiao had sprinkled the poisonous fog far away from his body. However, Ao Xieyun had managed to escape this calamity even though it was only an arm's length away from him. Ao Xieyun looked at the fishes and prawns that were 3 feet away from him. They floated up and got washed away by the water. Ao Xieyun kept his mouth shut and swallowed his saliva. Ao Xieyun stayed at the bottom of the river. Odu Xiao and the others were on the shore. They were only 20 or 30 feet away from each other. But no one could see each other. The sky had finally brightened. Everyone who had participated in the hunt for Ao Xieyun immediately got into action. Odu Xiao looked up and down. And his brows wrinkled even tighter. There's no smell on the other side of the river. And there's no trace of him either. This means that Ao Xieyun has escaped to this place and disappeared. Ao Xieyun should be hiding in this river if I'm not mistaken. But there's no movement in the river even though we've sprinkled such a large amount of 1,000 souls exterminating powder. We've confirmed that there's no discovery downstream. And Ao Xieyun isn't within 100 miles of here either. But there's no trace of him on the other side. In that case, Ao Xieyun's only hiding place was this river. We've reached a certain position in the river from the place where we're standing. There's no doubt about this. Odu Xiao insipidly said, the sky has brightened now. So, we can send everyone into the river to look for him. And we'll leave an expert on standby every 100 feet on the shore. We must dig Ao Xieyun out even if we have to overturn this river. Ao Xieyun's heart turned cold. He thought, I've finally reached this desperate situation. Chu Yang and his brothers had just set out when dawn had just broken. And the red sun had risen from the east. Everyone's divine light had converged after a few days of settling down. And they were full of energy. Even the sullen Tan Tan had returned to his original state. And the reason why they had woken up so early this time was because of Tan Tan. It was because Tan Tan had finally recovered. Moreover, he had made a ruckus while he had recovered. It was because Tan Tan had woken up from his watertight sleep. And he had suddenly discovered that he was normal, again. So, he had wanted to laugh at everything he had seen. And he had especially wanted to laugh at GMO Luo Kudi and Rue Butong. Moreover, that nightmarish image in his mind had never appeared again. That inexplicable neurotic feeling had also never appeared again. This was simply great news for Tan Tan. He had stared blankly for a while when he had first discovered this. Then he had finally come to his senses. He grabbed Rue Butong, who had been living in the same tent as him, and was now walking past him. Am I handsome? I've been silent for so many days. Am I handsome? Rue Butong, who had been frowning and feeling extremely depressed, immediately knelt down with a plop sound. Then he said with a mournful face, Master Tan, please spare me. I'm so depressed that I want to bang my head against the wall. Therefore Tan Tan walked out of the tent and rushed into GMO and Luo Kudi's tent without saying anything. He should have rushed into Chu Yang's tent. But he had a very serious conversation a few days ago. So, Tan Tan was a little embarrassed to do so. Therefore he rushed into the tent. Early in the morning he grabbed the two people who were sleeping like dead pigs, and threw them out of the tent. Then he winked at the two naked young men. Am I handsome? Am I handsome? You two tell me. GMO and Luo Kudi exploded on the spot. They had been sleeping soundly when their quilts had suddenly disappeared. Both of them were used to not sleeping soundly. So, they were so scared that they couldn't get up in the morning. Both of them screamed and jumped up at the same time. Both of them covered their private parts with their hands. They looked up in a panic and rage. They only saw two eyebrows fluttering in the wind. Then they heard a voice that was a mixture of a duck's voice and a wolf's howl. Am I handsome? Am I handsome? Am I handsome? They were so angry that they were hovering between life and death. I'll make you handsome. The two young masters rushed over with their buttocks naked. The two middle-grade king-level experts joined hands, and overturned the unprepared Tan Tan to the ground. Then they punched and kicked him. Tan Tan screamed loudly. How could he have imagined that he would encounter such abuse when he had come to ask a question in high spirits? The commotion was too big. So Chu Yang, Gu Du Xing and Dong Wushang rushed out of their tents at the same time. Then they identified the direction and rushed into GMO and Luo Kudi's tent. What they saw made the jaws of Chu Yang, who was always calm and collected, Gu Duxing, who was always cold and sharp, and Dong Wushang, who was always as steady and majestic as a mountain, drop to the ground at the same time. Even their eyeballs almost fell out of their eye sockets and smashed onto their shoes. The tent was filled with white petals and big white buttocks. GMO and Luo Kudi were naked as they held down the well-dressed Tan Tan. They were laughing, cursing, kicking and beating him. This is, what's going on? The three of them were shocked at the same time. They were dumbstruck at this moment. GMO and Luo Kudi screamed in fear. They quickly stood up, turned around and found their buttocks. Then they kicked them with a schwa sound. Tan Tan crawled up from the ground in shame. He was quite embarrassed. He was the dignified young Master Tan. When had he ever suffered such a loss? Then he saw Chu Yang in the blink of an eye. So he couldn't help but move closer to him. He opened his swollen eyes and asked, Chu Yang, do you think I'm handsome today? He was suddenly shocked as he said this. Chu Yang suddenly felt his eyes become moist. He stared blankly for a long time and didn't speak. Then he suddenly yelled and kicked this guy out. Then he pounced on him and cursed, You bastard! I'll make you handsome. You scared the hell out of the old watermark of setting sail. He ruthlessly punched and kicked him. He didn't show the slightest mercy. However, he had finally let go of the load in his heart. Chapter 572. The World Defying the Heavens. If you like this work, please vote or bookmark it. Don't know how to vote or bookmark it? Please read the post. Let us dance with the wind and clouds, the world defying the heavens. Let us read this magnificent chapter together. Chu Yang had beaten him to his heart's content this time. It was really satisfying. He had vented all his worries and worries. Tan Tan screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Next to him were 5 gloating faces. Finally, Chu Yang had vented his anger. He lifted his hand and felt refreshed. He waved his hand, get ready to set off. The brothers seemed to have remembered something as they walked on the road. But they couldn't remember the details in a daze. After walking for a long time, Hey, second young master Luo, fifth brother Luo, I think something's wrong with you. Miao Butong finally touched his chin and remembered. Luo Kudi's face turned red. Get lost. What's wrong with me? Yes, I remember, Dong Wushang suddenly realized. It seems that fifth brother Luo is really different from others. Where is it? Luo Kudi was battered and exhausted. He repeatedly bowed with his hands clasped. Brothers, spare me. Let's not discuss this issue anymore. Let's change the topic. Let's change it. For example, GMO likes to fart when he sleeps. He snores and farts at the same time. He farts 7 or 8 times a night. GMO was furious. He blurted out, "You don't have hair there. Why don't you let people talk about it?" Luo Kadi suddenly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He pointed his trembling finger at GMO in grief and indignation. You? He couldn't speak. GMO suddenly regretted. He hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry about this. I was careless. I said that your little bird doesn't have a... look at my mouth." He closed his mouth regretfully and didn't speak. It would have been better if GMO didn't explain. This explanation made everything clear. Luo Kadi wanted to die. He looked at GMO with tears in his eyes. He spat out blood and shouted, You. I'm so angry." Everyone held their bellies and laughed. Luo Kadi was so ashamed that he almost cried. Chuyang couldn't bear it and said, Little wolf, actually it's nothing. Azure dragons have existed since ancient times. As the saying goes, the azure dragon and the white tiger are just physical abnormalities. What is there to be shy about? Besides, this won't affect anything." As he spoke, he leaned closer to Luo Kadi's ear and whispered, "I heard that such a man would be exceptionally bold and powerful." Luo Kadi's face turned even redder. He suddenly shouted and said, "All right, you guys don't have to laugh. Let me make it clear to you." The laughter stopped abruptly. Everyone felt a little regretful in their hearts. How could a brother joke about another person's flaw like this? Actually, I've realized it long ago. That's why I've never bathed with you guys." Luo Kadi said calmly, as if he was about to die a martyr's death. Other kids, 12 or 13 years old, they've already got it. But until now I haven't. Everyone looked at him quietly, their eyes filled with shame. Besides, not only that, boss also said that it would be more powerful this way. But I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't do it. Do you guys understand? Luo Kadi roared angrily. Little Rod. GMO lowered his head in shame. I'm sorry. Dong Wushang, Gu Du Xing and Miao Butong stepped forward at the same time and said sincerely, Little Wolf, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have mentioned this. It's a sad thing for you. Luo Kadi smiled bitterly and said, There's nothing that shouldn't be mentioned. We're all brothers. I might as well say it out loud. After all, I can't say it in front of others. Telling you guys makes me feel more at ease. He said in a low voice, 2 years ago my family urged me to marry my fiancée. But I made all sorts of excuses. I was afraid of harming her. After all, my fiancée is a 1 in 1,000 beauty. If she were to be with someone like me who can't do it, wouldn't it be a waste of her life? Luo Kadi smiled bitterly and suddenly said loudly, Luo Kadi, don't think that I'm a good person. When I see a beautiful woman, I want to take liberties with her. When I see a brothel, I want to go in and take a look. When I see something fun and valuable that others don't have, I want to snatch it. But I won't do something that harms the life of an innocent person. This is the happiness of a woman's generation. If I can't give it to her, I won't marry her. If I'm normal, I'll definitely have 3 wives and 4 concubines. Even if I have 8 or 10 wives, I won't find it too much. The men out there are fighting and killing every day and all of them are dead. Don't tell me that I'll let the women live like widows? But I'm not normal now, so I can't. I can't do that. I can't have a single one. Why? She's a pure and innocent girl. If she were to be with me, she would still be pure and innocent until death? What kind of nonsense is that? Even if she's a woman, she still needs to enjoy life. Why should I deprive her of the taste of being a woman? My mother once said that only a woman who has given birth to a child is a real woman. I can't let her be a woman. Why should I harm her? I Luo Kadi want my face. But my face can't be exchanged for by harming an innocent girl. Now that I've said it out loud, I don't want this face anymore. When I return to the family, I'll go and break off the engagement. I'll say that I have a lover outside. After he finished speaking, Luo Kadi stood there in a daze for a while. Then he went limp like a deflated balloon. His whole body seemed to have lost all its energy at this moment. Gu Du Xing and the others stood there in a daze. They felt that it wouldn't be good to comfort him at this time, but it wouldn't be good to not comfort him either. You don't need to care about me. Since I've said it out loud, it means that I've let it go. Motherfucker, isn't it just that I can't be a man? Luo Kadi turned his face away and laughed loudly. He said, So what if I can't be a man? There are so many eunuchs in this world. I can't be a man, but can't I be a wolf for 3 days? Oh. Ah. Even though he was laughing, his brothers wanted to cry. Including GMO, no one had thought that Luo Kudi's heart was actually hiding such deep pain. His body was obviously very healthy, but he couldn't be a man. For a man, this was simply unbearable. It was also a great humiliation. And just now they even laughed at him. Thinking of this, Gu Duxing and the others almost wanted to slap their own mouths. Everyone turned their faces away at the same time. They couldn't bear to look at Luo Kudi's face at this time. So it's this matter? Chu Yang smiled faintly. Little wolf, if you had said it earlier, you would have probably hugged your baby by now. Motherfucker, I thought it was some serious illness. So it's this. Sigh, it's as easy as lifting a finger. Ah? The first to react wasn't Luo Kudi. Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang and the others gathered around with a swoosh. They were extremely excited as they asked, Boss, you have a way? Of course I have a way. Chu Yang raised his head proudly. Not only do I have a way, but I can also make the little wolf more ferocious. Humph, originally I could also help the few of you improve your abilities at the same time. It's just that you were laughing at your brothers just now. You know. Huh? Boss, you won't, right? GMO and Wei Butong screamed miserably. They cried out pitifully, don't. A woo motherfucker. Luo Kudi's miserable atmosphere suddenly disappeared. He howled like a wolf and jumped like a tiger. He jumped over, Boss, old man, you are my biological father and my second parent. You are the light of my life. The son of spring, the son of summer, the son of autumn and the son of winter. Or really? Can it really be cured? You don't believe me? Chu Yang squinted his eyes. I believe. Oh dear old man, quickly give it to me. I can't wait any longer. Luo Kudi jumped up high. I'll go back and get married. Motherfucker, I suddenly want to compose a poem. Compose a poem? GMO and the others were shocked. This guy's change was too fast, right? Yes, compose a poem. Luo Kudi nodded affirmatively. He said excitedly, I've been raising this spear for more than 10 years. Besides peeing, I've done nothing else. Today I've finally found an advantage. With a plop, Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang fell to the ground due to this powerful poem, even with their mental fortitude and cultivation. Their mouths were crooked and their eyes were slanted. Their whole bodies were spasming. As for GMO and Rue Butong, they were practically worshipping it. Second young Master Ji cheered and gave a thumbs up. Good. Miao Butong prostrated himself in admiration. This is really good. Tan Tan raised his eyebrows and moved closer. I also want to repent. Get lost. Chu Yang's whole body was spasming. He kicked this troublemaker away. Old man, that medicine. Luo Kudi finally finished his intoxication. He moved closer and revealed a flattering smile. Chu Yang knew that Luo Kudi was playing around. But he was more nervous than anyone else in his heart. He was more worried about personal gains and losses than at any other time. He was only using a forced smile to show that he didn't care. But, in fact, he was extremely concerned in his heart. Although he was smiling and playing around, his eyes were filled with intense anxiety. Even his pupils were somewhat dilated. His fingers were trying hard to control them to the point that they were almost stiff. But they were still slightly trembling. I can't make any more jokes at this time. I'm Luo Kudi's only hope right now. I'm afraid that Luo Kudi will collapse if I even frown. Chu Yang reached into his bosom. In fact, he had reached into the tribulation space, and took out a bottle of Lust Dragon's blood. He held it in his hand and solemnly said, Wolf Cub, you can be cured if you drink this bottle of medicine. But I have to remind you of something. Big brother, please say it. Luo Kudi saw Chu Yang's serious expression. So he couldn't help but become serious as well. It doesn't matter what happens to you. As long as you're still with us, there's no such thing as losing face between us. And I won't allow my brothers to feel inferior in front of each other. That will make us uncomfortable. Chu Yang deeply said, Your embarrassment is our embarrassment. Your humiliation is our joint humiliation. So, we'll face it with you no matter what happens. Luo Kudi's lips trembled. He didn't speak. But he tightly bit his lips. Drink it. Chu Yang handed over the Lust Dragon's blood. Luo Kudi looked at this small bottle with mixed feelings in his eyes. Then he finally received it with trembling hands. He pulled out the cork, turned around, covered his face with his hand and drank it in one gulp. Then he put down his sleeves, and wiped away the 2 drops of tears that had just fallen from his eyes. No one saw it. He was somewhat embarrassed. So he turned his head to look. He saw that Gudu Xing Dong Wushang GMO and Terry Butong had their backs to him. Their foreheads were gathered together and they seemed to be discussing something. They didn't seem to be paying attention to him. Second update. I'm going out to eat now. I swear to God that I won't drink alcohol. I'll write the third and fourth updates as soon as I come back. Everyone vote for me first. Vote for me first. Vote for me first. Vote for me first. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.